Morning, Jackie.
Morning.
There you are. Cool. Amazing. Morning, Felipe.
All right. It appears that we are at quorum, so we will begin the meeting. Good morning, everyone. The New York City Board of Correction, June 8th, 2021 meeting is now in session. Our scheduled business will start by voting on the draft May 11th, 2021 board meeting minutes, which board members have received. Will a board member move for a vote to approve the May 11th, 2021 meeting minutes?
So moved.
May I have another board member? Thank you. Boy, it has been seconded. Are there any edits? Any debate? Hearing and seeing none, I ask for a vote to approve the May 11th, 2021 minutes. All in favor? Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Has everyone said aye? Are there any opposed? All right, May 11th, 2021 board meeting minutes have been approved. Let's just make sure before we move forward that we have attendance for this board meeting. So let's see, we have Marco Carrion, Felipe Franco, Jacqueline Sherman, Robert Cohen, Vice Chair Stanley Richards. Is there another? I cannot see if there are other board members that have joined. Meg, are there other board?
It doesn't look like it. Bennett, do we have James on the phone or Steve?
It looks like James just joined. Give me a second.
Trying to get on the WebEx. I couldn't get on it, so I got to use the telephone.
Good morning, James. Good to have you with us. All right.
And I'll check in with Steve.
Okay, good deal. We'll move forward. This morning, we welcome new Department of Correction Commissioner Vincent Chevraldi. Mr. Chevraldi has a long and distinguished career in criminal justice reform in the policy space and leading agencies. He was the co-director of the Columbia Justice Lab and founder of the Justice Policy Institute. He has also served as senior advisor in the Mayor's Office for Criminal Justice, commissioner of the New York City Department of Probation, and director of juvenile corrections in Washington, D.C. In a moment, we will give Commissioner Chevraldi an opportunity to address the board and the public. On behalf of the board and staff, I welcome Commissioner Chevraldi and look forward to working closely with him and with his team. We realize that Commissioner Chevraldi assumes leadership of a very complex agency as the department faces numerous operational challenges. We hope and will seek to serve as an oversight body that supports our shared goals of a safer, fairer, more humane jail system in New York City. Our responsibility as a board is to oversee and engage to ensure a better system, but we want to make sure that we are not running the jails, and we're glad to have Commissioner Chevraldi with us. I welcome you now, Commissioner Chevraldi, to address the board and the public.
Good morning, Chair Jones-Austin, Vice Chair Richards, and members of the Board of Correction. I'm smiling under here in case you can't see it, okay? I'll keep my remarks brief this morning. I know you have a lot to do, and today only marks the beginning of my second week with the department. But I did want to take advantage of this opportunity to introduce myself to all of you and to briefly lay out my vision for the department's important work over the next several months. As you know, I come to DOC at a time of significant transition and reform. I've been incredibly busy over the past week, meeting with uniform and non-uniform staff, service providers, people in custody, members of this board, and other key stakeholders across the city. From these discussions, it's abundantly clear to me that the department and our partners at CHS face unprecedented challenges throughout the COVID pandemic, the commitment and selflessness demonstrated by department and CHS staffs, walking daily into an environment of forced proximity rather than social distancing over the past year is inspiring. There are many stories of heroism from the past months that never made it out to the public. I'm truly honored to lead this department into what we all hope will be brighter days ahead. In order to do so, however, we must face today's reality head on and acknowledge that this department is not where we need it to be or want it to be. Conditions within our jails, staff morale, and the department's relationship with the public and other key stakeholders are unsustainably bad. As the department reopens services in the coming weeks, I will focus our efforts on the core issues that are impacting the city's jails, including improving programming and conditions for young adults, where we see the highest rates of violence and far too much idleness, and likewise, improving services and care for seriously mentally ill people in custody. I've said this to our uniform and non-uniform staff over the past week, and I'll repeat it here publicly. I have a very high standard of care. Of course, all people under the care of the department must absolutely be treated with respect and dignity. But I believe we have to go further to create a system where we treat all people in our care as we would our own sons, daughters, or family members treated if they were in the exact same situation. Likewise, I believe our staff must be treated with the same dignity and respect that we would demand for ourselves if we were working in the department, along with every single person who walks into our facilities, whether they work for a governmental agency like DOE or CHS, are volunteers or work for a nonprofit, or are family members of people who are incarcerated. Until we treat everybody in the building with dignity and respect, the way we'd want our own treated under the same circumstances, we'll never crack the thorny culture change issues that have plagued the department for far too long. There are very real challenges facing this department today, some of which will be discussed at greater length during this meeting, but central to each challenge is the unerring requirement that all of the people in the department's care, all of our staff and all community members feel seen, heard, respected, and cared for. Over the next several weeks and months, my focus will be on prioritizing this requirement through all aspects of our work, including, very importantly, through the provision of services and programming. I really believe that more robust and better organized programming is going to be this department's salvation for three reasons. First and foremost, providing programming is simply the right thing to do. It would be unimaginable for me as a parent to leave my child in a room all day with nothing to do. As people, we need to be productively engaged with our fellow human beings in order to feel human. It's as simple as that. Secondly, when people are engaged in programs, they're more likely to re-enter their neighborhoods as contributing members of our shared communities, thereby breaking the cycle of incarceration. When people are in our custody, it's unacceptable not to offer them the kinds of programming that will help them turn their lives around to the greatest degree possible. And finally, the key to safety for everyone living, working in, and visiting our jails is to have the people confined here engaged in meaningful programming. It's my deep and abiding belief that engagement and productive activities will help keep everyone safe, in addition to just being the right thing to do with our fellow human beings. From my early discussions with many of you, I believe we share that vision. However, to keep from getting ahead of ourselves, I must acknowledge that this transformation will take significant work. I promise to be transparent with this board, to share information proactively, and to describe our challenges honestly and directly. I have incredible respect for you all. I understand you engage in these meetings without compensation as concerned New Yorkers and with great intentions. And I intend to gain your feedback and engage in discussions around significant matters with you all throughout my tenure as commissioner. I can tell you right now, however, that I intend to be direct on this, that I and this department will not be successful without the trust of this board. I was brought in to lead this department and to serve as an organizational change agent, something with which I have 4 decades of experience. Collectively, we will never be successful if this board insists on making critical operational decisions on behalf of the department at monthly meetings. I recognize, and many of you have bluntly told me, that the department has not exactly built up a deep well of trust with the board. I understand that, and that may frustrate you as you feel progress isn't happening fast enough, and I agree that progress isn't happening fast enough. But the way to achieve greater progress won't be through board actions. The department can't be reformed by committee, in my view. The amount of time my staff and I committed to the board this past week, and that I foresee in the future, as we will likely need several variances to the rule that is likely to pass today, will absolutely divert my attention from other critical issues like dramatically expanding programming system-wide, reforming custody for young adults and seriously mentally ill folks, expanding air conditioning throughout the system, and improving morale so staff return to work in much, much higher numbers. Some of my priorities. Each of those is a tall order in and of themselves, and if I'm required to focus on everything, I won't be able to focus on anything. My team here are true professionals. They share my vision for this department, and we're collectively prepared to work tirelessly toward a more equitable, just, and humane system and correction department. I'm simply asking you that you provide us the ability to do our jobs. With that, I want to finish by saying I'm grateful for this opportunity to address you all. I know we will have future opportunities to engage on important matters, and I sincerely hope that we can continue to build out and refine this partnership on behalf of all the people who live and work in the department facilities. I'm very excited about the work ahead, and I sincerely hope you share in my excitement. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Chevraldi, and I want to thank you for your remarks, for your comments, and for your blunt expression of concerns. We need to hear from you. We need to understand where you and the department are in this moment, and we need to engage in a very honest and transparent manner one with another. So we thank you for opening with these remarks and for speaking to us about the concerns that you have vis-a-vis working with the board. We will aim to work collaboratively with one another and to support each other in our respective roles. So I thank you for that. Today, the board will vote on a rule governing restrictive housing in New York City jails. This rule changes the way the department responds to incidents of violence committed by detained persons and aims to ensure accountability and safety, but in a more humane and effective manner. During the public comment period in 2020 and 2021, the board received invaluable feedback and input from people with lived experience, family members of persons who've been detained, correction officers, the department, advocates, and attorneys. The board has sought to listen and to incorporate, where deemed appropriate, this feedback, all to create a rule that balances safety with support, while establishing an environment where behavior change is both possible and rewarded. This rule ends solitary confinement and all other current forms of restrictive housing on November 1st, 2021, and creates the Risk Management Accountability System, RMAS. RMAS is a two-level progression model that includes attorney representation at the infraction hearing and throughout the process, a minimum 10 hours out of cell, socializing with at least one other person, a strong presumption of progression from level 1 to level 2 in 15 days, and from level 2 in 15 days. The ability of the department to keep people in RMAS only if there's a clear documented threat to safety. Individualized behavioral support plans, steady, experienced case managers, 5 hours of daily programming, including required therapeutic programming in space outside the day room space, and daily rounding by health and mental health staff. The rule creates the Restorative Rehabilitation Unit, RRU, as a step down from RMAS. The RRU provides 14-hour lockout, access to general population minimum standards, and services along with intensive programming. Those in the RRU will receive an individualized programming plan and a required 6 hours of congregate programming. This rule ends the use of routine restraint desks for all by November. It requires the department to use cells for de-escalation confinement after incidents rather than intake areas. It limits scope of lockdowns to only housing areas that must be locked down, and it requires regular and public reporting by the department. After the board passes the rule, it will go into effect 30 days after it is published in the city record later this week. In the coming months, the board will work closely with the department to implement this rule, and the department will provide regular implementation updates at every board meeting. I want to thank again the working group that the city and the board convened to establish a plan for ending punitive segregation. Thank you, Vice Chair Stanley Richards, former Commissioner Brand, and Just Leadership USA President and CEO Deanna Hoskins for your service to the working group, and COBA President Benny Basio for your input and contributions throughout the process. I want to thank every board member for their crucial role in this process and for their tireless efforts. A very special thank you to board and committee members, Jackie Sherman, who led this process at its inception and during the first year, steering us in the right direction. Bobby Cohen, who stayed the course at every turn to ensure the right outcome, and Stanley Richards for leading the work of the subcommittee and shouldering so much of the process with DOC and COBA. Our executive director, Meg Egan, along with the staff at BOC, especially Kate McMahon, Emily Turner, Bennett Stein, and Michelle Oversee, have been extraordinary throughout. I want to thank the team at the Department of Correction, Correctional Health Services, and City Hall for their work to ensure that the rule we passed today is feasible and practical, given the complicated nature of the jail system. Your expertise has been vital to this process. I want to acknowledge and thank the uniformed officers in particular for your input and for your sharing of your concerns for the well-being of all correction officers throughout the process, as well as being concerned about detained persons. We've sought to create a rule that responds to your concerns because officer safety is of equal and paramount importance to the board. And lastly, but certainly not leastly, the people in custody, families, and advocates. Your work to push us to do more at every step of this process has been most critical. Your perspective and your commitment has been invaluable. This has been a long process, and I appreciate everyone for staying committed to creating a rule that sets a path forward for ensuring a more safe and humane jail system here in New York City. We would not be at this point were it not for the input of each and every one of you. I thank you. We'll now hear public comment on the restrictive housing rule that was just presented. We'll also request public comment on the 2 variance requests from CHS. So before we have the public comment on the restrictive housing rule and the variance requests that CHS has requested, our executive director will present 2 other variances.
Thanks, Jennifer. Today CHS is requesting long-standing variances regarding psychotropic medication and tuberculosis screening. In January of 2017, the board unanimously passed a resolution to pursue rulemaking to integrate these variances into minimum standards, but has not yet done so due to capacity constraints. The board first granted the variance on psychotropic medication in November of 2005. The variance allows psychiatrists to see and evaluate stable adult patients on psychotropic medications in general population at least every 28 days rather than every 14 days. CHS has said that this is consistent with the current community standard. As of June 1st, 37% of the jail population are prescribed psychotropic medications. This is a 1% decrease since December of 2020, when the proportion of the population receiving psychotropic medications reached its recorded high. Of the 2,128 people prescribed psychotropic medications, 35% are in general population and on a 28-day medication schedule as permitted by the variance. 23% of people with psychotropic prescriptions are in mental observation housing and on a 14-day schedule. And 42% are in general population housing and on a 14-day schedule. In December 2020, 50% of people with psychotropic prescriptions were on a 28-day schedule, 21% in MO housing on a 14-day schedule, and 29% in GP on a 14-day schedule. The board first granted the variance on tuberculosis testing in July 2013. This variance allows CHS to use either interferon gamma release assays or TST for tuberculosis screening, and to exempt from repeat screening those who have a documented negative test in the in the 6 months prior to their admission. At the January 2018 public meeting, Dr. Cohen responded to safety concerns raised by the New York lawyers for public interest and stated that the exemption from repeat screening is safe and consistent with public health recommendations on screening for tuberculosis in jails. That is, that's the overview for the 2 variances.
Thank you. I will now ask CHS to present these requests.
Can you hear us?
Yep.
Thank
Yes,
you.
we can hear you.
Thank you, Meg. This is Ross McDonald from CHS. So I don't think we have anything to add. I appreciate your description of the 2 longstanding variances, and we would like to submit them both again at this meeting.
Okay, thank you. We will now hear public comment. We've been given a list of speakers who signed up. I'm going to call each person's name. When you hear your name, please raise your hand using the hand icon below the participants list on your WebEx screen. If you don't see the participants list, click on the silhouette of a person. If you don't see the participants list, click on the silhouette of a person on the menu at the bottom of your screen. Once you open the participants list, you should see the hand icon in order to raise your hand. When you raise your hand, we will unmute you and you will be able to turn on your video. You can then begin your public comment. I will tell you when it has been 3 minutes, as you will have 3 minutes only, and we will move to the next speaker. Please limit your comments to the restrictive housing rule that is to be voted upon and the requested variances. We will hold a general public comment at the end of the meeting. The board also welcomes written comment. You can email written comment to boc@boc.nyc.gov, boc@boc.nyc.gov, or mail your written comment to our new office address, 2 Lafayette, 12th floor, room 1221, New York, New York, 10007. 2 Lafayette, 12th floor, room 1221, New York, New York, 10007. And now I will call our first speaker, Mary Lynn Rolwes. Is Mary Lynn Rolwes with us? She's raised her hand.
I unmuted her, so she should be able to, or she should be able to unmute herself and turn it.
Please unmute yourself.
Good morning.
Good morning. Please begin.
I'm Mary Lynn Rolwes, and I'm the director of the Prisoners' Rights Project of the Legal Aid Society. We welcome Commissioner Chevraldi. Pardon me, the video was off. We welcome Commissioner Chevraldi, and we look forward to working with you, sir. There's no question that everybody in this call has been engaged in a very well-intentioned process to bring clarity and stability to the restrictive housing in our city jails. But let me be blunt about where we have landed today. These standards don't work, they can't work, and you should not adopt them. The laudable goals that we set out to achieve are not met by this language. These are not standards that will ensure safety and bring basic principles of justice that are essential to securing trust of the governed in our jails. And in fact, those principles are butchered by these rules. Time permits me to give just one example. A fundamental flaw in these rules, the absence of durational limits on time spent in restrictive housing. No, the progression language of section 613, 15 and 30-day periods does not secure this, because what it gives, the section on extensions, more than takes away. This is truly a case where the exception swallows the rule. We were not in the room where it happened. We don't know how this came into existence, but let me explain its effect. In section 615, you grant the department the authority to keep a person in either level of RAMS indefinitely, so long as a useless paper trail is generated in 7-day increments. The department need only assert it has information a person poses a threat to safety, a very low threshold, but does not require disclosure of such information because subsection D does most of the gutting of that provision, allowing the department to keep secret from the incarcerated person and counsel information it deems material to maintaining security. And this is not salvaged by the so-called administrative appeal of confinement, which sets a forfeiture trap, a 3-day requirement for people to challenge to the general counsel their indefinite extension of confinement. The perversity of this shows that this is not intended to secure justice, and no provisions for notice and access to counsel can cure this. The result here is contrary to the laudable language in the narrative summary of your rules, are standards that allow for unlimited punishment on the basis of secret government information. That is but one example of the flaws in the actual language of the rules before you today.
Thank you. We must move forward. Thank you.
You're welcome.
The next person who has signed up to speak is Scott Paltrowitz. I'm not sure that whether he has arrived. Bennett is Scott.
I don't see Scott on yet.
Okay, thank you. The next person is COBA President Benny Basio.
I don't believe Benny joined either.
Okay. The next person is Matthew Romano. All right, please unmute yourself and begin.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Matthew Romano. I'm the Bronx Borough Trustee on the COBA Executive Board. I'm going to speak about an incident and an inmate that the proposed rule in the restrictive housing unit would not apply to. This particular inmate has, before I say anything, some of the comments that I'm going to make will be explicit because it's a very heinous incident that was committed. This inmate has been in the system since 2014. He's held on an alleged sexual assault. He continues to commit crimes while in our custody to avoid going upstate. And this individual also manipulates the system in a way where he calls 311 and files formal sexual allegations and complaints on officers, mainly on male officers, so that only female officers work on the tier where he is housed. Currently, there are 30 officers that have complaints that are placed against them, 27 male, 3 female. Now, on the date of May 21st, this particular individual committed a heinous act that I have not seen in my career. While this officer was conducting a tour on the housing area she was responsible for, this individual wedged his penis in between the gate and he ejaculated on her as she walked by. The staff was able to get him out of get everything moving, where they preserved the evidence, they preserved everything. He was placed in an area where he was able to be put in ESH, and he was put in a restrictive housing area. But again, this individual manipulates the system by getting placed on a medical exclusion list because of false allegations that he does make. Now, 3 days later, he's placed right back into the same jail, and that officer has to have the mental scar that she has to deal with for the rest of her life. My question is, when you have an individual like this, how is this restrictive housing rule going to come into play with this particular type of person? And the inmates that we have now are ones that have committed more serious crimes and the ones that these officers have to deal with on a consistent basis. How is it fair for every single female correction officer in here that has to deal with this type of individual.
Thank you. Thank you. We will move to the next person to speak, Ashaki Antoine. Ashaki Antoine. Please unmute yourself. If you're unmuted, please begin.
Hi, good morning.
Good
My
morning.
name is Asaki Antoine, and I'm the first citywide trustee of the Corrections Benevolent Association, the second largest union in New York City, and also an active correction officer. The proposed rule lacked the substance needed to enforce DOC departmental policy and procedures. It is naive to think that the current proposed rule to end punitive segregation presented by the Board of Corrections will provide safer jails for everyone and will hold inmates accountable for their blatant disrespect and disregard of inmates' rules while detained. Chapter 6, Section 9, Exclusion. This rule excludes inmates from the Risk Management Accountability System who have been diagnosed with mental illness disorders and/or basic medical conditions. In the month of June 2020, the mayor of New York City expanded the list of exclusions. This list includes inmates who have asthma, diabetes, heart, lung, liver, kidney disease, and various disabilities. 3 weeks ago, as Matthew Romano explained, an inmate required assistance. The female officer approached the inmate cell, and through the crease of the door, he exposed his penis and ejaculated, which made contact with the officer's hand and uniform pants leg. The inmate is on the medical exclusion list. This inmate under the proposed rule will not be held accountable for this appalling and degrading sexual act committed while incarcerated. This is not just one isolated incident. There are many inmates who are continuously commit vicious acts while detained and exploit being on the medical exclusion list as a way to terrorize and create chaos in the jails. In regards to the accountability for the inmates who commit these crimes, what are the alternatives for inmates who violate, commit crimes, assaults, slashing, stabbing, sexual acts, flashings while detained, but are on the medical exclusion list? What are the alternatives? Based on Chapter 6, 9, these inmates will not be held accountable, further diminishing the behaviors while incarcerated. Chapter 6, 2, the proposed rule clearly prohibits the automatic monetary fine to all guilty infractions only for destruction of city property. With the proposed limited days in Ramis and the most recent added, the medical exclusion list, which inmates will not be held accountable for obstructing the cameras, committing crimes, spitting, splashing, assaulting other officers, assaulting other inmates. Without the monetary fine, what will deter the inmates from repeating the same misbehaviors? There are rules in place to maintain order. Why is this being ignored? Again, the protection for the victims, which includes civilians and correctional officers, are simply afterthoughts. Most inmates are detained, just want to do their time and go home. Correctional officers come to work and put their lives on the line daily, deserve better than this. And lawlessness has taken over New York City and is now trickled over into the jails of Rikers Island. One-sided agendas is not cutting it.
I'm sorry. Thank you. The next person we'll hear from is Scott Paltrowitz. Scott Paltrowitz.
Scott, you're now unmuted.
Hello?
Hello.
Can you hear me?
Yes, please begin.
Thank you. It's really hard to know what to say when there's an entity like the Board of Correction that has so much power over people's lives and has such an immense opportunity to do something really meaningful and beneficial to people, and instead works so hard to cling to the status quo. Two things that I want to highlight. Number one is the bottom line with this rule is that it allows a person to be locked alone in a cell 23 hours a day, and as was stated earlier, even indefinitely. You can call it whatever you want. You can claim to end solitary confinement, but this is solitary confinement, locked alone in a cell 23 hours a day. And it's completely disingenuous to make the claim by this board or the mayor to say that's ending solitary confinement. The second thing to say is it also is just wrong, and similarly goes beyond, belief, that the board would say that the Halt Solitary Act that was passed by the state earlier this year doesn't apply to the board's rules. There is just no other understanding of people being locked alone in a cell again than to be what the Halt bill says is, quote, any form of cell confinement. The Halt bill says segregated confinement is, quote, any form of cell confinement. Under the proposed rule, people will be locked in a cell alone. Now, the cell is different from the cell they sleep in, but it's right next door and it's smaller. We all saw pictures of it. We saw the rendering the board and the department themselves put forward. It's a person locked alone in a cell. And to claim that that is not, quote, any form of cell confinement is just legally wrong and, to be honest, quite absurd. The last thing that I would say is even to the point that the speakers previous made about individuals engaging in harmful behavior. Locking people up and keeping them isolated isn't going to stop that kind of behavior. It's going to exacerbate it. The entire purpose of what all of the people who've lost their loved ones inside, people who've survived solitary and their allies have been saying for the last several years to this board is that this kind of punitive, torturous, isolating approach exacerbates people's needs and their behaviors in turn. And that evidence shows that the exact opposite approach is what actually will reduce violence in the jails. And that
I'm
means people
sorry,
need to have
I have
engagement.
to end your
and
comment
program.
now. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is Cleveland Broadnax with us? Has he joined yet?
Give me 1 second to check. No, yes, not called in.
Okay. We will go to him if he comes. Should he come? Darren Mack is the next person to speak. Darren Mack. All right, his hand is raised. Please unmute yourself and begin.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for having this hearing today. First, I want to say my name is Darren Mack. I'm a member of the Jails Action Coalition and a survivor of solitary confinement. Thank you so much to everyone, the advocates, the families of so many people who have either suffered or died in solitary confinement, and allies fighting to defend the human rights of incarcerated people. This is an opportunity for this board in New York City to set a precedent towards ending solitary confinement, taking the lead and setting a pathway on that road to the goal that we all want. And I know it's a very difficult and hard decision to make in writing these rules. I haven't had the opportunity to read all over 100 pages of the rules, but it's one thing that I want to point out, two things I want to point out to this board. And one is that the importance of people having counsel when receiving disciplinary reports. You have people who are incarcerated that have, not much education, and if they do, they don't know the law and their rights, and this puts them at a disadvantage within the system, not only for the charges that they're being charged with, but also, within corrections in regards to the disciplinary system, against experts who have years or perhaps even decades of basically, like, sometimes railroading people into solitary confinement in order to meet their needs and as a use of control. So I reckon, I urge this board to give people in custody access to counsel, at these hearings. It's at no cost to the city at all. It'll bring more transparency to the system, and also the current practices, at these hearings, it's been from my own experience. I know that railroading people happens. It happens a lot, and I think that's one thing that that this board could put inside these rules in order to, to have some type of oversight of what's happening with people that's being written up to go into the system. Because from what I've seen now, according to these rules that's been written, we're not in the solitary confinement, and if we're not going to do that, then give people access to counsel so they won't be subjected to it. And finally, I want to say that I believe that DLC, like they use semantics, they use all these, try to come up with all these different cases. But if we look at the federal, monitor report that just was released, a lot of the violence, they don't talk about that.
I have to end because everybody else only is getting 3 minutes. I apologize to you, but I must.
All right, thank you so much.
Bennett, I'm going to ask you to unmute the next person, who is Tawanda Rubin.
I don't believe that person is on right now.
Okay. The next person listed to speak is Darlene McDay. Her hand is raised. Please unmute yourself and begin. Yeah, we can hear you. Please begin.
Hi, my name is Darlene McDay. I sent the board several reports regarding what happened to my son in an upstate prison. The fact that officers had falsified documents and also lied about the fact that they assaulted my son, eventually leading to his death. I hope that was taken into consideration when these rules were made. Even though it was an upstate facility, we know that these things still happen in prisons. As far as the rules are concerned, you can't have someone within a cell going into a cage. It is still solitary confinement. Talking to one other person through basically a cage is not meaningful contact with others. And it is a slap in the face and a joke to think that you can believe that that's okay. And you could believe that that doesn't go against what is now going to be the law, which is halt solitary confinement. We worked very hard to get these rules changed, to get the law changed, and that is the law. And for New York City to think that they could do something outside of the law is absolutely ridiculous to me. As far as this variance on psychotropic medications and changing the amount of time that a person has to be checked on, I absolutely do not agree with this at all. There are dangerous psychotropic medications being given to people, even their antidepressants. These people need to be monitored more often. And a lot of times I see, and you'll see in the reports that I gave you regarding my son over and over again, they did not send him to mental health visits. They did not do what they were supposed to do. They gave him medications that I would have never agreed with. People are not educated on these medications. I've worked in a jail before where they don't even explain things to people. And it is a sad state that we would allow people to be given medications that they don't understand how they're affecting them. And then we would say, you could see someone less often. They need the help. Often these people they come from abusive backgrounds. They've had a difficult life. They haven't gone to school. They don't have education. And even when they do, they don't understand what these medications can do to them. So I think it's very wrong to say that they could be monitored less often. So that should not be allowed at all. But again, regarding these rules, having a cage within a cage is not meaningful. And I would hope that the board would see that. And I hope that the board would take more consideration as to the fact that officers, I understand they need to be safe, but the people in prison need to be safe as well. And when they're lied and listened to, that's not safe.
Thank you. Thank you for your comment. The next person scheduled to speak is Minister Dr. Victoria A. Phillips. Please begin.
Good morning, everyone. It's Dr. V. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Please mute yourselves. You know my invisible disabilities. I can't deal with all the background noise. So this restrictive rule breaks my heart. As an Army brat with the mother buried in military cemetery, advocating for others, I advocate as if it's my own life. And working behind the walls, I know the truth that goes on there. So Chair, I want to address you this morning, since it's your leadership. Where is your expertise for fulfilling the promise of opportunity? You have an opportunity to lead this board into greatness, although actually I didn't think you were worthy of such a position after years of exhibiting a real lack of concern by coming late and leaving early for the pre-scheduled monthly meetings. Or how in the fall before your appointment, you sat on stage and told a formerly incarcerated individual who was speaking of his own torture that you don't get paid for this. Today, I want you to directly know, as a melanin woman and leader of this oversight board for the largest legalized funneling of modern day slavery, you are failing at your opportunity to be great. I mentioned this next point at the last meeting, but you had already left, so I'll say it again. You stopped Dr. Safer from questioning DOC around the drugs still entering the facilities, although the island has been closed to the public for over a year. You didn't think the conversation aligned with the vote, yet on the record I personally read from DOC variance requests where they mentioned drugs as a reason for the request. So what is your response to the K2 running rampant throughout the facilities? Again, causing me to question just how serious you take your appointment or the lives of New Yorkers. So my question to you is, how many lives have been stolen by DOC under your direct watch? From one CEO to another, your leadership is short and tainted. How many deadlines for responses had DOC missed? As an attorney and Black woman, how can a rule that keeps someone locked 23 hours a day, because from one cage to another cage is still solitary, you even propose this? Or allow the public to receive a proposed rule that never even allowed legal representation to occur? It only occurred in your rule after we raised hell. And I want to point out that I've testified 5 times on the record about a man who gave Ms. Glover reports, and the board has yet to follow up with him. But as chair, you have done nothing to follow up with me regarding his case. And lastly, I want to point out that a DOC staff member mentioned how shocked they were a few meetings ago when you stopped Dr. Cohen's suggestion of this board visiting the units before making a vote. So my question to you is, are you really fulfilling your promise of opportunity to New Yorkers as chair, or simply continuing the cycle of white supremacy, which has always been done by selected skin folks to keep those of us preyed upon at bay? Please step up. We have a new commissioner. Now is the time to fulfill your promise of opportunity to those in New York. Stay blessed. Peace and blessings, everyone.
Thank you. The next person to speak is, hold tight, my screen has closed. The next person to speak will be Danielle Gerard. Is Danielle Gerard with us?
Yes, she's with us.
Okay, please begin. You've been unmuted.
Thank you, Chair Jones-Austin, board members, and Ms. Egan. I'm Danielle Gerard, Senior Staff Attorney at Children's Rights. We strenuously oppose the Board of Corrections amended rules relating to the use of restrictive housing in facilities operated by the Department of Correction. As a member of the New York City Jails Action Coalition and a supporter of Halt Solitary, Children's Rights supports the testimony of the other advocates who are commenting on this latest version of the revised rules. We note that the board released the new rules at 10:38 p.m. on Friday, June 4th. This does not enable stakeholders and advocates to review the new draft in anything other than a cursory way. This does not provide an opportunity for robust and detailed comment. This signals that public input is merely a formality. As we testified at the April board meeting, the revised rules fall woefully short of the board's and the mayor's alleged objective of ending solitary confinement. Instead, the rules institute the RMAS, which is just solitary confinement by another name. Pictures of NIC housing, the prototype for RMAS, clearly illustrate that the structures do not provide open space essential for healthy, meaningful human interaction and engagement. In an openly acknowledged sleight of hand, the RMA system simply replaces, quote, specific references to punitive segregation and enhanced supervision housing. The rules continue to raise alarms about the treatment of young adults in the city's jails. The rules provide for young adults to be held in cage-like confinement structures up to 23 hours a day, include little focus on implementing meaningful programming, and continue with the use of variances. We refer the board to our April testimony for additional details. It is more than disappointing to see that after countless hours of testimony from survivors and impacted advocates alike, the amended rules are what the board considers to be a solution to the years-long public demand to end solitary confinement. In accordance with the board's and the mayor's promises, the board must vote against the revised rules. The board should instead use its supposed oversight authority to call for a new round of rulemaking that actually ends solitary confinement once and for all for young adults and other incarcerated persons in New York City's jails. Anything less perpetuates an inhumane practice that is proven not to reduce violence or promote safety. Anything less makes a mockery of this process. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. The next person to speak listed is Melania Brown. I'm not sure Melania is with us.
Yeah, I don't believe Melania is with us.
Okay, the next person that I have is Mike Kincaid, and that person has raised their hand. Please begin. Unmute yourself and begin. Please unmute. Okay.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you for letting me speak today. I am a member of the Jails Action Coalition and Halt Solitary Confinement. I'm also on the task force concerning treatment of TGNC NBI people in New York City jails. And it's not lost on anyone, I hope, that today marks 2 years and 1 day since the death of Layleen Polanco. And when I reviewed what I could of the proposed rule on restrictive housing over the weekend, what concerned me is that so many of the regulations and rules are already in place, or some version of what is already in place. Ms. Polanco should never have been in the restrictive housing she was placed in because of her medical diagnoses, and she should have been checked on more frequently. This is very clearly in the Board of Corrections report on this matter. So some of the edits, some of the proposed new rules in what we're discussing today increase the number and the frequency of these visits, but they don't really address how to make people adhere to rules, how to make a CHS, DOC, any volunteers or any program staff who would be allowed into these units actually adhere to the rules that are already in place, because we've seen repeatedly that there are some regulations in place. They're obviously not sufficient to end the torture of solitary confinement, but they're not being adhered to. So what is going to be different about this set of rules? I'm really concerned that even the comments that we've heard recently questioning people's medical and mental health diagnoses and whether or not they're really medically counterindicated for solitary confinement suggests to me that these rules are so flexible, so open to interpretation, so individual, that it's not going to actually end the torture of solitary confinement. The way to end the torture of solitary confinement is to have clear written rules saying we do not place people in restrictive housing for more than X number of hours a day. And that is not what is in this rule. It allows you to continue indefinitely with all these different types of exceptions. And I'm going to echo what some other folks have said, that I would love to hear and see the board's thinking as to why HALT solitary confinement, the HALT Act, doesn't apply here. It appears to apply perfectly here, ending solitary confinement, moving someone from a one small room to another small room, as many people before me have said, is not a difference because of two different rooms doesn't stop it from being solitary confinement. And finally, because it is June and we do recognize Pride this month, I do want to say that after the death of Layleen Polanco, the task force that I now sit on was formed by the City Council. The board oversees it. And it's been over a year and we've yet to produce a report. I think the board should be concerned about this. I think the board should be questioning this. I think that DOC and CHS should also be upping their participation.
Thank you.
this
I'm sorry,
task
but
force.
I have to end.
Or more people will
Be fair
die.
to everybody. Thank you. The next person scheduled to speak is Lucia Alonso or Lucia Alonso. Forgive me for the mispronunciation of your name. Please unmute yourself and begin.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Good morning, members of the New York City Board of Correction, and thank you for the opportunity to testify. My name is Lucia Alonso, and I work with the Women's Community Justice Association, a nonprofit advocating for justice-impacted women, trans, and gender nonconforming people. The board's new proposed rules claim to end solitary confinement, but actually perpetuate another version of indefinite isolation. We urge the board to vote against the new proposed rules and adopt guidelines in line with the HALT Solitary Confinement Act. The HALT Act, recently enacted by New York State and applicable to New York City jails, requires the Board of Correction to strengthen its current proposed restrictive housing rule in order to be in compliance with HALT. Politically, morally, legally, and policy-wise, HALT's passage must make the Board of Corrections strengthen various aspects of its current proposed restrictive housing rule. The so-called risk management and accountability system still allows people to be held in conditions that are extremely restrictive and isolating. HALT prohibits segregated confinement beyond 15 consecutive days, including what is proposed in RMAS Level 1 and in some circumstances in Level 2. I hear correctional officers' concerns with incarcerated people committing harm, but clearly punishing people does not work. They are already incarcerated and being punished in the most violent institution. People need help. They need counseling. Punishment does not stop cycles of violence and harm. It will not make conditions safer for anyone, including correctional officers. It's a lazy solution to an ongoing problem. It's been 2 years since Layleen Polanco died on Rikers Island and 6 years since Khalif Browder died. Instead of ending solitary as promised, New York City plans to expand new forms of solitary. Survivors of solitary and people who have lost their loved ones to solitary should not have to be here today and testify in front of strangers about their deepest pains. They should not have to constantly re-traumatize themselves. They should be getting the help and support they deserve, not begging their representatives and the Board of Correction to do what is right. These proposed rules perpetuate some of the worst parts of solitary confinement, including allowing people to be chained and shackled. Isolation is torture, it is inhumane, it is harmful, it does not stop cycles of violence, it does not heal, nor does it correct. Punitive segregation must be fully eliminated, not simply be changed to a different name. In line with the mayor's and the Board of Corrections promise, the board must amend the proposed rule to actually end solitary confinement once and for all in New York City. Thank you.
Thank you. The next person scheduled to speak is Five Malamek, but I don't believe that person is with us.
Yeah, that's not with us.
Okay. The next person is Kelly Grace.
Don't believe Kelly Grace is with us.
Okay. The next person is Jared Trujillo. Jared Trujillo. Jared, you've been moved over to the speaker stage. Please raise your hand. Please raise your hand, Jared.
I'll briefly unmute Jared and see if they're there. Jared, are you with us? I'll shoot Jared a note and see if they're having technical difficulties.
And the next person that I have on the list is Joanne Couturier. Joanne Couturier, I do not see that person as a participant.
Yeah, I don't believe that person's there.
Okay. And the last person scheduled to speak is Jennifer Parrish. You please begin.
Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Great, thank you. My name is Jennifer Parrish. I'm the Director of Criminal Justice Advocacy at the Urban Justice Center Mental Health Project and a member of the Halt Solitary Campaign and the Jails Action Coalition. This morning, I'm outraged and deeply saddened that this board is claiming that the rules it's poised to adopt today end the inhumane practice of solitary confinement, and that the new model guarantees that people in custody who've committed serious offenses in jail still receive at least 10 hours outside of their cell per day. None of you should think for a moment that you are ending solitary confinement. You shouldn't say it to yourself, your family, the press, and you certainly should not proclaim it at this meeting. If your goal was to end punitive segregation, to make its replacement slightly more humane, then maybe you've achieved it, but you certainly have not ended solitary. It's very disheartening to me that this board, which is made up of people who seem to have integrity, who seem to be honest people committed to helping others, is proclaiming that people in RMAS will have 10 hours of out of cell time, when you know that being in a cage, attached to a cage, without any physical contact with other people is not out of cell time. You can say that it's better than being in a single cell with a brick wall separating one person from another, but you cannot genuinely say that it's out of cell time. That is just dishonest, and we expect more from you. And claiming that you're ending solitary and providing 10 hours out of cell isn't just hyperbole, a government agency claiming to do more than it's actually doing, spinning what is happening to make it sound better than it is. Claiming that time in RMAS's attached cell is out of cell time has real consequences. You are intentionally avoiding the requirements of the Halt Solitary Confinement Act passed earlier this year. At a moment when the state of New York is moving away from solitary confinement, this board is adopting a rule that bypasses those protections for incarcerated people by claiming that time in an individual cage is out of cell time. I would not be surprised to see this from a conservative correction administrator fighting tooth and nail to hang on to the most isolative, punitive system they could devise. But I am shocked that this board, which claims to embrace change, would adopt rules that violate the HALT Act. Quite frankly, it's despicable. You must not approve a system that unquestionably violates the HALT Act. I urge you to reject this rule.
Thank you. Thank you very much. That there are several people who signed up to speak whose names we called that were not in the room, if you will, at the time their names were called. Bennett, just let me know, have they since joined?
Jared has rejoined us.
Okay. Jared Trujillo, please begin.
Good morning, and my apologies for my internet being really terrible this morning.
No worries.
My name is Jared Trujillo. I'm policy counsel at the New York Civil Liberties Union. And I just want to note how momentous it is that we are here in this moment right now. This is ending solitary confinement, or at least the way that is practiced in New York, is not just important for the state, but it's really about complying with the UN Mandela rules. It's really about ensuring that people that are in some of the most restrictive forms of confinement in jails, in prisons in this country are not tortured. I want to acknowledge the work of the board. I want to acknowledge the intention of the board. The intentions of the board, which are laudable. And I do want to acknowledge that after the last hearing, the board did seem to hear advocates as far as making changes to access to counsel, time limits for people in solitary, and programming. However, in order to actually comply with, if not the law, the spirit of HALT, in order to comply with those actual Mandela rules that would end the way that torture is practiced in confined spaces in this country, the board really does need to make further amendments to the current proposed rules to make sure that people are actually being respected. First of all, I want to mention out of cell time. A lot of other speakers have noted that having people in a close confined space with only access to one other person is not meaningful out of cell time. It's not just us pontificating. Every indication, every study has shown that double celling people and giving people only access to one other person is oftentimes as harmful as solitary confinement itself, as mentally damaging as the prior practice of solitary confinement. Secondly, I want to briefly talk about access to counsel. While I appreciate the board amending that rule, I do want to make sure that as implemented, access to counsel is actually expansive. All the public defender organizations have graciously said that they would continue to represent their clients that are in solitary, which is great. However, there is a portion of people that are at Rikers, that are in jails in the city, that are represented by 18Bs. And it's important to make sure that those attorneys also have a meaningful ability to communicate with their clients, that they have meaningful notice of all these hearings, and that there's actual access to everyone that needs an attorney before they're being placed in level 1 or level 2. And then finally, I just want to know time limits for placement in level 1 and level 2 of the MASs. HALT is clear as far as how long someone can be placed into solitary confinement. And while I appreciate that there were steps and there were amendments to limit the amount of time that someone can be placed in level 1 and level 2, this proposal is not.
I have to end. I'm sorry. I have to end to be fair to everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Melania Brown. Please begin.
Hello, good morning.
Good morning. Please begin.
I just want the Board of Correction rules. The Board of Correction rules do not end solitary confinement. They fully allow solitary, but just give it another name. Being locked alone 23 hours or more a day in a small cell next to another cell still is solitary confinement. There is no other word for it. This type of confinement would not have saved my sister, Leilene Polanco. Today, on Sunday marked 2 years since my best friend, my sister, my church, Leilene, has been gone. Leilene's ashes are around my neck. Solitary confinement needs to actually come to an end. No human should be locked in a cage within a cage. People in jail are already locked up away from their family, and they are already suffering. My sister went into solitary and came out in a body bag. She didn't deserve to be thrown in solitary confinement. She didn't deserve to die alone. Calling out for me and my mom. Leilene should still be here today. My sister was put into solitary confinement and died because of her gender identity. I am praying Leilene's death ends solitary confinement. The mayor used my sister's name and promised that he would end solitary confinement. With these rules, he broke his promise. The mayor and all of his elects must stop using our loved one's name in vain. The mayor and the board must change these rules and actually end solitary. Since they clearly will not do that, the city council must not wait another day to pass legislation that truly ends solitary confinement. As many of you may know, my name is Melania Brown. I am the sister of Leilene Polanco and an activist. My sister died alone on June 7, 2019 in solitary confinement. She was placed there against medical objections, medical staff advice. She should have never been there. She is a prime example that COs and the jail system use solitary confinement for whenever they want, for whatever reason. They could block any medical advice, staff advice. They could do all that. They could just use it whenever they feel like it, even if it could cost somebody's life. This is not okay. I really do hope that what you guys are trying to do with RMAS does not really succeed. I really do hope that you guys fully end solitary confinement. Changing the name is not ending solitary confinement. My sister should have been here today with me, with us. She should have been in this world. It's not okay how how the system treats people. It's inhumane. Solitary confinement is inhumane. I don't understand the purpose of having a cage within a cage. It's not okay. I hope that my sister's death is the last death in solitary confinement. I really do hope that her death does not go in vain. I really do hope that her death saves many other lives and other humans from going through what she went through, and family members, as my family, living with a painful life sentence. Like, I'm running out of things to say to you guys. I'm running out of things to say for you guys to understand the pain that my family feels and how inhumane this practice is. I truly am, and I really do hope that you guys find it in your heart to please end it. Just please. Halt solitary is law.
Thank
Please
you.
enforce
Thank
it.
you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you very much. Bennett, are there any others that whose names were listed to speak who were not on when called?
I don't believe so. I think we've reached everything.
Okay. We will now move to to a vote on the restrictive housing rule. And so I will begin by asking for a board member to move to vote on the rule.
So moved.
I ask for a board member to second the motion.
Second.
Okay. We will now open the floor for debate. I'm opening the floor for debate. Board members, you can discuss points that were raised, ask questions of the department, introduce amendments to the final rule. Keep in mind that if you do introduce an amendment to the final rule, it must be approved by unanimous vote. Let me first say there were points that were made, questions raised concerning HALT and its application to this proposed rule, as well as concerns about extensions and exceptions being granted to the rule for extensions. The Board of Corrections Deputy General Counsel conducted an analysis to determine whether or not HALT applied. And let me also just say that one of the things that the committee did when the SCOC rules were passed, the regulations were promulgated, and when HALT was passed, the committee took a close look and did an analysis to see what applied, and then also worked to try to work within the spirit of these this new law and this new regulation, even if it didn't directly apply. So concerning HALT, this is what the board determined. HALT applies to segregated confinement, defined as cell confinement for more than 17 hours a day, with limited exceptions. RMAS Level 1 consists of a cell sleeping bathroom area with 3 walls and a door made of bars located at the front of the cell. That door opens to another enclosed area made of bars with a TV, a television, and a seat inside. Notwithstanding the fact that the New York Corrections Law does not define the term cell confinement, the New York State Corrections Law does not define the term cell confinement, the board and the city each independently concluded that RMAS Level 1 does not constitute cell confinement for purposes of HALT because, as opposed to segregated confinement, where people are held for 17 plus hours a day in the walled cell they sleep in with no opportunity to see or to speak to anyone else, people in RMAS Level 1 will have opportunity to lock out of their cell area for 10 hours a day into an anteroom where they will be able to see and talk with at least one other person in custody. People will have access to the television, their own television, to their own phone, and programming in the anteroom. RMAS Level 1 is certainly physically restrictive, which is why the final rule ensures a person has a disciplinary hearing and legal representation before being housed there and places limits around how long someone can stay, tight limits. SCOC agreed that this arrangement does not constitute cell confinement and therefore does not fall under HALT technically. The final rule goes further than HALT in important ways. RMAS Level 1 provides for more programming hours, 5+ recreation as compared to 4 including recreation, and does not allow for the use of routine restraint desks during programming in that level, which HALT seemingly still permits. The RRU is a true GP unit, general population unit, with 14 hours of lockout, as opposed to the residential step-downs in HALT, which only seem to expressly guarantee 7 hours of lockout. The RRUs in our rule also require more programming during lockout, 6 hours of programming versus HALT 6 hours of lockout, which may include a combination of programming, treatment, meals, and services. And this maintains periodic reviews every 15 days. RMAS maintains periodic reviews every 15 days, whereas HALT's step-downs only guarantee one review every 60 days. Concerning progression and extension, let me just reread the rule so that people have a clear sense of it, the proposed rule. Progression. All persons, and this is paragraph 613, progression. All persons in level 1 must progress to level 2 after 15 days unless the facility head and the chief of department each approve a limited extension pursuant to the criteria set forth in 40 RCNY, paragraph 16-15, section 16-15. All persons in RMAS must step down to a restorative rehabilitation unit after they have been in RMAS for a total of 30 days, unless the facility head and the chief of the department each approve a limited extension in level 2 pursuant to 40 RCNY section 6-15. Section 6-15, extensions. A, the department may not hold someone in RMAS level 1 or 2 for more than the time specified in 40 RCNY section 6-13, unless the facility head and the chief of the department each determine in writing prior to the presumed end of the person's time in that level that there is a specific documented intelligence or information that the person poses a serious threat to safety if they were to leave that level. Such extension determinations may only be made for 7 days at a time. Paragraph B, if the facility head determines to extend a person's time in level 1 or level 2 pursuant to the criteria in 40 RCNY section 6-15A, the facility head must send the determination to the chief of department within 1 business day. Paragraph C, the chief of department shall review the facility head's extension determination and approve or reject it within 1 business day of receipt. The chief's decisions shall be stated in writing along with all supporting material and physical evidence and sent to the person in custody, their legal representative, the board, and CHA within 1 business day of such decision. Paragraph D, when the department sends the chief's decision and supporting written materials to the person in custody and their legal representative, the department may only withhold or redact the following sensitive information based on security concerns. 1, information that could reasonably lead to the identification of a confidential informant or vulnerable witness. 2, personally identifying information not material to the decision. 3, operational information not known to people in custody that is material to maintaining security. Paragraph E, the department may not redact or withhold any material physical evidence under 40 RCNY, section 6-15 D 1 through 3 from the affected person or their legal representative on the grounds that it is a photograph or recording taken inside the facility, or because it identifies witnesses unless the department meets one of the justifications set forth in that section. Paragraph F, any redactions or withholdings made pursuant to 40 RCNY, section 6-15, paragraph D1 through 3, must be accompanied by a justification log generally describing the redacted or withheld information and the reasons therefor. A copy of such justification log must be sent to the Board of Correction at the same time it is sent to the affected person and their legal representative. Paragraph G, the affected person will be asked to sign the notice of the chief's decision as proof of receipt. If the person does not sign the notice, the staff person serving the notice must note the person's refusal on the notice. Paragraph H, the department may not extend a person's length of stay in RMAS by imposing consecutive lengths of stay regarding multiple offenses for which the person was found guilty at a single hearing. Paragraph I, after a person has been in RMAS for 30 days, they are entitled to file an administrative appeal to the department's general counsel, and anytime the chief of department renders a decision to extend their time in RMAS pursuant to RCNY section 6-15, paragraph C. The department shall ensure people have access to legal representation for purposes of this administrative appeal, and that notice of the right to appeal is afforded to all persons held in RMAS longer than 30 days. Paragraph J. People in custody seeking to file an administrative appeal under 40 RCNY section 6-15, paragraph I, shall have 3 business days from receipt of the chief of the department's decision to file the appeal, and the department's general counsel shall render a decision within 2 business days of receipt of the appeal. I will now open the floor for debate, for comment by board members. Bobby, I'm not certain if you.
Yes, I'll speak, Chair. Just welcome, Commissioner Chevraldi. Look forward to working with you and your staff. I think that this rule is a substantial accomplishment, period. I don't agree that RMAS 1 is solitary confinement under another name. I think it is a miserable construction by the Department of Correction. I hope that that they will that in the new facilities that nothing like this will be considered. And I have not heard a word from the previous commissioner and her staff about improving that. I hope that we will. But I think it is, and I know it is different than solitary confinement. I'm not going to. I do have a lot of experience. I've been to solitary confinement units all over the country. I've talked to former commissioners of the New York City Department of Correction who told me that OBCC, the central Bing, was not solitary confinement because people, were not fed bread and water and lived on a concrete floor. That was different, and this is very different. But it is very restrictive, and the amount of time spent there should be extremely limited. I disagree with the rule in that it has given the department the ability to confine people into RMAS 1 forever, and I regret that that the current rule contains that. I'm not going to suggest an amendment. I often vote against variance requests where I know I'm not going to carry the day. I'm not going to raise to make an amendment here right now because I know it can't pass because of the rule requiring unanimity and variance in rulemaking amendment, And don't feel any need to put anybody else on the spot of my fellow board members, period. I do think that there is the fact that there will be representation at the time of infraction is a great advance, and we should it's important. It's very important, and it's very rare in this country, or maybe barely exist in a few other jurisdictions, and it's a tremendous accomplishment. I worry about the department's ability to implement that. The department historically, and Commissioner Chevraldi, I'm sure you will engage this issue. The Department of Corrections is not good at doing things, particularly complex things that it hasn't done before. And this is very new to the department. The department resisted it. But it's good, and it's very important, particularly for infractions. And the board should monitor it, and the department should monitor it, and we should publish on a monthly basis statistics demonstrating that it's working. And on the issue of representation after in infractions, that's going to be really difficult. I mean, there's comment earlier about timing problems, getting video access to persons in RMAS1 who are appealing their setting up the hearing. This is going to be very complicated, and I'm not confident that without very, very careful monitoring by the board, but much more importantly, monitoring by the department itself, and our regular publications on this issue, that it will work. So I appreciate the halt concern. I anticipate that there will be litigation on this issue. I think that's fine, and there should be, because this is an issue that it's important, and I endorse halt, and fundamentally I endorse our rule. Thank you.
Thank you, Board Member Cohn. Are there other board members who wish to speak at this time? Okay. I just want to make sure that I haven't missed anyone. Okay. Hearing no amendments, we will move to a roll call on the vote. I ask that each board member state out loud, make sure that you are unmuted, your vote in favor or not of the rule, yay or nay. And I will go according to persons as they are listed on my screen. So I will begin with Board Member Richards.
Yes.
Next, I believe I have Board Member Perino.
In favor.
Thank you. Board Member Franco.
Yes.
Board Member Sherman.
Yes.
Board Member Carrion.
Yes.
Board Member Safer.
Support.
And Board Member Cohen.
Yes.
And I vote yes in favor as well. So the rule to end restrictive housing is restrictive housing as we've known it, and to adopt the RMAS model with RRU has passed. Again, I want to thank everybody, everyone who's participated in this process, including the people external to New York City, experts from around the country with whom the board engaged to develop this model. Thank you to everybody, and we will continue to work with the department to try to perfect this system as best we can. I too believe that it moves us forward, but more work is necessary and continues to be done, and we will monitor the implementation of this rule and work to ensure that people do not languish in this new model. We will now move to the votes on the psychotropic medication variances. So if I may ask for a motion from a board member to vote on the requested variance concerning psychotropic medication.
So move.
May I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. I'm open the floor for debate and conditions. If I'm remembering correctly, Megan, are there existing conditions on this variance?
There are no existing conditions.
All right. Does anyone want to propose a condition? Okay. Hearing no conditions, I ask for I'm going to call the vote. Each board member, I need you to state out loud if you are in favor or not. Now I'll go in reverse order, beginning with Board Member Cohen.
Yes.
Board Member Sherman.
Yes.
Board Member Franco.
Yes.
Board Member Perino.
In favor.
Board Member Carrion.
Yes.
Board Member Safer.
Support.
Board Member Richards.
Yes.
And I vote yes as well. The next vote concerns tuberculosis testing. We're going to turn to a vote on the tuberculosis screening variance. May I have a motion to vote on the requested variance?
So move.
Thank you, Board Member Cohen. And is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. I will open the floor for debate and conditions. There presently are no existing conditions on this variance. Okay, hearing none, I'm going to close debate and ask for a motion to vote on the variance. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, and now we'll move to a vote on the variance itself. Board Member Safer?
Support.
Board Member Richards?
Support.
Board Member Cohen?
Support.
Board Member Perino?
Support.
Board Member Franco?
Yes.
Board Member Sherman?
Yes.
Board Member Carrion?
Yes.
And I vote yes as well. All right, both variances have passed, and that concludes our voting for this this board meeting. We will now move to receive a report on the Department of Corrections plans regarding management of summer heat. I ask Executive Director Egan to present.
Thank you. As it has for decades, the Board of Correction closely monitored the heat conditions in the city jails last summer, particularly for those who are heat sensitive and in restrictive housing. On May 20th, DOC issued its annual temperature monitoring procedures teletype. The department has also published its summer heat plan on its website. Next week, the board plans to issue its summer 2020 heat report. While we have observed progress in monitoring and managing heat-sensitive individuals, there remain areas for additional improvement. I will now ask the board to present their summer heat plan.
Good afternoon, or good morning, board. Thank you for excusing me for just a moment. I'm happy to talk about the department's heat plan this morning. As the board and the public knows in previous years, the department takes very seriously the care of people during extreme weather. During hot weather months, the department enacts its summer heat plan. That includes distributing thousands of shorts and t-shirts to people in custody, regular temperature monitoring of people in custody, and daily conversations about people who with heat sensitivity. This year is no exception. We have bagged ice in advance of the hot weather. We are monitoring all of our areas without air conditioning on a daily basis. Despite the closure of NYC, which was one of our 2 fully air-conditioned facilities, we have added 8 additional units with air conditioning and are continuing to seek ways to add additional air conditioning to our current spaces. Our future borough-based jails will be fully climate controlled, and we certainly look forward to the day when there is full air conditioning for all people and all staff working in our facilities. At this present time, approximately 50%, a little bit over 50% of all of the department's housing units have air conditioning, and approximately 50% of, a little over 50%, closer to 60% of people in custody are in AC housing. Nearly all individuals who are heat sensitive are housed in AC housing, with a percentage of those individuals who are heat sensitive who did refuse, they would prefer to stay where they're presently housed. I'm going to turn it over to SCA Rick Bush to provide a little additional information on how we work together with our partners at CHS to care for individuals who are known to be clinically heat sensitive.
Great, thank you. Good morning. So as you recall, last year, we implemented a new operation order regarding heat sensitivity, which expanded certain requirements for such things as overrides for safety and security issues, a clear process for identifying those individuals who are requesting to remain in non-heat sensitive housing through a refusal process. And we also formalized a automated communication system with our partners at CHS, which through a broad distribution list each day, the department receives new notifications of heat sensitivity within the 24-hour period that then allows us in the facilities to take timely action upon those designations. Because of these improvements in our process, last year we were very successful in housing people timely and appropriately. We continued that through the start of this heat season. We continue to reinforce to our staff that heat sensitivity is a 12-month a year process. That is not something that we need to only take care of during high heat days. And because of that, we at this point have a small portion of the population that is not in heat sensitivity, who does not have either refusal or override. And the vast majority of those individuals are in transition to heat sensitivity locations.
Board, I'd also like to add, we certainly understand and agree with you that transparency of the public is critically important. We've had a public heat plan up on our website for the past month, available to both you and any member of the public who wants to better understand how the department is managing the hot weather. We've also provided through our weekly flyer to people in custody information about how to stay cool during the hot weather months, as well as information on again reiterating that if they feel heat illness, they should see CHS and be evaluated for heat sensitivity. Chief Jennings, is there anything that you'd like to add on this?
Yes, so good morning. So one of the things that we have done due to our plan is that we have practically housed everyone who has heat sensitive designations in those air conditioning housings year long. And so we have worked on a daily basis to keep people in air conditioning housing. And like SCA Bush says, that has proven to be successful, so that when the warm weather does come around, we're not moving large numbers of individuals. We've had them housed all year round properly. And so the only exclusions to that has been if a person is in no admission housing or AE housing due to the closure of Manhattan. And then once they're finished with their quarantine periods, they are then relocated in air-conditioned housing. We have also had our facility maintenance division work tirelessly to bring up additional housing area with air conditioning that we have never had. And so we have 4 housing areas at Rndc that's due to come online by the end of the month. And we also have additional housing areas at GRVC that currently houses our ESH housing areas to come online within the next 2 months. So they are working. We have a meeting to talk about air conditioning housing and how we could possibly add additional air conditions so that everyone perhaps could be in air conditioning housing. And that's what the new borough-based facilities will give. But we're also working to do our portion of obtaining that as we stay in our current facilities.
So I just want to add just 1 or 2 quick things, and then I'll let y'all go. We did provide some data, and so I just want to say the data out loud. It's only effective June 1st, and it changes day to day. But as of June 1st, 72.5% of people designated as heat sensitive. And remember, CHS medical professionals do that designating. That's not us. So it's which I think is good. It's a step removed from the correctional decision. 72.5% of people designated heat sensitive are housed in heat sensitive air conditioned housing. 22.2% refused. 2.6% received the security override, and 2.6% are the new admissions that the chief talked about. Everybody hates this. It's not just the incarcerated people. All of our staff, this is one of the first issues I talked with COVID President Bosquio yesterday. We want 100% air conditioning. It's just a miserable place to be. And Chief Jennings and I have already had several conversations. We're pulling together staff to figure out which facilities to close. And it's a combination of which facilities have operational doors, they're secure enough, the plumbing works. It's not, you can't just close. We wish we could just close the ones that are not air conditioned and put people into ones that are air conditioned. But some of the ones that are air conditioned, unfortunately, God bless you, have other problems like security problems and physical plant problems. So it's kind of a web of complicated stuff that we are, we've got our noses to the grindstone on, but it's in no one's interest to be in a hot jail in the summer, and we're busting our butts on it right now.
Thank you, Commissioner. Are there any questions or comments on the part of the board? Would any board members
Yes,
like to?
I have a question for the department. This is James Perino. I know Rosa Singer built that new wing and probably has air conditioning, and I know they were going to do a separate entrance, but I'm sure that was probably a capital project. I don't think they got past with it. So I was wondering if they're utilizing that wing, which is 500 beds, air-conditioned beds, this summer. I was wondering if that's something that they're utilizing.
So, hi, James. So yes, the women are utilizing the 800-bed unit. But however, most of Rose and Singer, because of the amount of women that we have in custody today, is being underutilized. And that's just the truth of the matter. But they are using some of those housing areas in the 800-bed for air conditioning, yes.
Well, I thought it was 500, 800. Wow, that would be such a great asset. I just wish the department and the city gave them enough money to split that facility, because that would make 800 air-conditioned, high-tech building, because it's a very new building, accessible to us, and it'll probably solve a lot of our problems. But I'm sure there's much more paperwork and politics to get past that. But I think that's something that I would hope that the city and the department would get together with and utilize that access, because working 27 years in prison, I know some is just like too, Chief. It's like those walls sweat, and not only for staff or for detainees, it's a rough way to go. It's a rough way to go. I know that
everyone.
Yeah, nobody liked it. I mean, I will say I've had several conversations with First Deputy Mayor Fullingham, and he is committed to helping us on this. He's not holding back. We've got to get, Chief and I have a meeting scheduled, I forget, today, tomorrow, with all the data, because it is a big puzzle. I mean, even what you just mentioned about the 800-bed facility, that would require us to sort of squish the footprint for the women, and some of the program spaces in different parts of that. So it's not, none of this is a flip a switch, let's just move them into the air-conditioned spots. And so we would want to make sure staff, women's advocates, before we would do anything like that. So every bit of it is going to have a series of pluses and minuses from the standpoint of physical plant, security, air conditioning, literally, I kid you not, plumbing, leaking roofs, and program space for different populations. And like you do right now, we're going to have to choose between a bunch of imperfect solutions. There's no home runs left. They already hit all the home runs. We're looking for singles now.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Are there other board members who would like to comment or ask a question?
I guess I would just like to, I'm sorry.
Quick question, Commissioner and Chief. How many women and mothers are incarcerated in Rikers today?
We have approximately 250 women, and we currently have no babies in the infirmary.
Thank you.
I would just like to follow up on James's point and Felipe's. A year ago today, there were 120 women in Rosie's. Today there are 250. That's a terrible set of numbers, and the city should be ashamed of itself because of that. But for Commissioner Chevraldi, sometimes heat gets really out of control, and it's likely to get there this year or next year. I would urge you, in the absence of a comprehensive program moving forward with Rosie's, to develop an emergency capacity to utilize those those hundreds of air-conditioned spaces, living spaces in Rosie's in the event of a severe heat emergency. We've seen terrible situations before. This is an emergency plan, not routine plan. Thank you.
Commissioner Cohen, just so I'm sorry, no, I'm on mute. Yeah, that's really intriguing, and I wonder, and I'd love to chat with you maybe offline about the benefit and cost of an emergency plan versus a permanent one. I mean, I'm not sold that we couldn't do something permanent either. I just haven't, you know, in day 5, literally this is day 5, I haven't kicked the tires enough on all the various options, but I'd love to chat with you about it.
I'd be happy to. I was involved in a situation in Michigan which required that, and the department was able to establish a fairly large emergency heat sensitive facility. I'll get back to you.
Thanks.
And Commissioner, I think it's an opportunity to kind of work with the Mayor's Office of Criminal Justice and the DA and others to figure out a way of reducing those significant number of women in jails, as we know that they don't need to be there most of the time.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. The whole population is up. It's not just the women. The whole facilities population is up from the bottom. It was in the 3,000s. Now it's in the high 5,000s. Most of them are pre-sentenced. The vast majority are. There's a couple of hundred technical people locked up for technical parole violations. If the less is more bill passes in the next 2 or 3 days, that should really cut into that. And then there's a few hundred, I think it's under 200 today, but don't quote me on that, who are city sentenced. The city's done a pretty good job of getting them down from around 800 where it used to hover. But I don't know enough yet about why those 200 are still here. I don't know whether we can do more furloughing for them, more use of hotels, more use of programs. And I hope to bring on staff specifically to wake up and go to sleep every day with a knot in their stomach worrying about the population. So, because part of it we actually have power over, which is the sentenced population. Part of it we can influence, which I know Mopte had done a lot of, but I think that has waned during the pandemic. So I'm trying to revisit a lot of that. I think there's parts of it that we are responsible for, getting people to court on time, making sure people have good access to their attorneys so that things don't get unnecessarily delayed. But it's this might actually be something I know how to do. So I'm gonna put my own personal self into that while we're trying to improve conditions, because the fewer places we have open, the less stretched out our staff will be, and that'll solve a whole bunch of other problems. So it's everything kind of cascades over itself. But I appreciate that, Commissioner Franco.
Yeah, well, and commissioners, you know, in many places, including New York City, there have been a commitment to end youth women's incarcerations, and it has actually been effective in many other localities, spearheaded by Vera. So I don't see any reason why we should try to drive 0 women in prison.
I'd love to have that conversation with you. I closed the girls' unit in DC. We had no further girls' unit after I was done at about a year. And I am meeting with the women's advocates with City Hall like next week to specifically talk about a variety of issues. I'm sure that's going to be on the table.
Thank you. Are there other comments or questions? And we look to receive updates as the summer progresses on the status of these activities. The next update concerns COVID-19. We've asked the department and CHS to provide an update on the response, the continuing response to the COVID crisis. And I just want to thank once again the DOC and CHS, as well as people in custody, for their many efforts to mitigate the spread of the virus. And I want to commend DOC, CHS for their efforts to vaccinate as many people in custody as possible and to safely resume the operation of critical jail services. Like CHS and the department, we believe that vaccination for all who are in the jails, people in custody and staff, is essential to ending this emergency and controlling as best we can against the spread of the virus in our jails. And we believe the resumption of jail services is critical to the well-being of people in custody. To allow for ample discussion on jail reopening, the board's presentation will be focused on COVID cases in the jails, the jail population, and vaccination. A longer presentation complete with key data points and trends on housing area capacity and testing will be posted on the board's website after this meeting.
Jennifer, would you like me to go through that presentation?
Please.
Great. So as of May 31st, 10% of the jail population, a total of 599 people, had confirmed COVID-19. That's either active or recovered. Only 3 people with confirmed COVID-19 had an active infection on this day. As of May 31st, there were 313 COVID cases among CHS staff and 2,146 COVID cases among DOC staff. In May, DOC reported 50 new staff cases, up 61% compared to April when there were 127 new cases reported. CHS reported 4 new staff cases in May, down 43% compared to April when there were 7 cases reported. The first wave of the COVID-19 pandemic prompted coordinated efforts to rapidly reduce the jail population, as Commissioner Chevraldi just noted. By April 29th, 2020, the jail population fell to a historic low of 3,832. This trend slowly reversed for much of the latter part of the pandemic, and the jail population peaked at 5,803 on March 29th of 2021. This is a 51% increase compared to April 29th of 2020. Since then, the jail population increase has leveled off. As of May 31st, 2021, there were 5,741 people in jail. On Monday, May 31st, the New York City jails held 5,058 people in pretrial detention. 217 were serving a city sentence. 229 people were held on technical parole violations with no open case. 237 people were in custody for other reasons, which could be state sentenced or state ready. And there were 854 people aged 50 and over, including 49 who were held solely on a technical parole violation. As we noted in our last meeting, CHS added Vaccination Metrics to its public data snapshots on April 5th. Between January 7th and June 1st of 2021, CHS administered 1 vaccine dose to 2,541 people in custody and completely vaccinated 2,066 people in custody. On April 20th, CHS began reporting the percentage of people in jail who had received at least 1 vaccine dose. And then on April 28th, began reporting the percentage of people in jail who had completed vaccination. As of June 1st, 37% of people in custody had received one vaccine dose, and 30% of people in custody had completed vaccination. Since March of 2020, normal jail operations have been significantly reduced, including the suspension of visiting, congregate religious services, and law library. The department has announced that they will begin reopening these essential services, and we look forward to hearing details of that plan today. I will turn it to DOC and CHS to provide their updates.
So
CHS, you want to go first?
I can be pretty quick. This is Patsy Yang for CHS. Thank you, Meg, for doing the data summary so well. Makes my job very easy. Just to update, the 7-day positivity rate currently is 0.34. We continue to be lower than the rest of the city in general. The number of active cases currently in custody, it numbers 3 individuals. I will note that from January the 23rd of January of this year, our 7-day positivity was 7.34 as compared to June 7th, which is 0.34.
So while the rate of positivity has continued to go down as it has been in the rest of the city, we remain very watchful and careful. We have not changed our protocols. It's a precaution, particularly because there continue to be, while so far seemingly low risk, the possibility of breakthrough cases of variants. And as the city itself opens up and as the jails open up, the possibility of reintroduction and resurgence of cases within the facilities remains. As Meg, you noted, we continue to offer vaccination to our patients. I think people on this call know that CHS was the first in the state of New York to offer vaccine at all to any person in custody. That was on January 7th. We continue to do that. We continue to offer that both at points of vaccination, where patients are brought to a single point of administration, as well as to have roving teams that go from housing area to housing area. We continue all our clinicians and providers to educate, inform, and offer vaccination to our patients at every point of contact, from intake, new admission, clinic encounters, to housing areas that we continue to go to and provide education and updated information. And we intend to continue that. We also offer incentives to our patients, everything from T-shirts to deodorant. We recently began to offer a $25 bonus to people who are fully vaccinated in the commissary as an additional incentive, and we're hoping that will help pick up the uptake. We continue to offer Pfizer and Johnson & Johnson/Janssen. Unfortunately, the publicity around J&J, however momentary, continues to have a longer lasting impact on the desire to have J&J than the precaution lasted. But we continue to offer that particularly in certain housing areas where the opportunities to go and repeat for the second dose is harder. I think that's about it. And I can wait for questions until after Vinny does his thing. Okay.
Someone else is going to speak now. Everybody's looking at me right now. So someone else is going to speak right now. But I do want to say before they go, Commissioner Cohen, you said earlier that DOC doesn't do things well, and there's a lot of stuff we don't do well. So I'm gonna try to simultaneously not be hyperbolic and not be defensive during my public discussions with you all. So I'm trying not to be defensive about that, because I know there's a lot of stuff we don't do well, and we're trying to fix that. They knocked this out of the park. I mean, I'm watching this around the country, and I'm going to say this because I'm not taking any credit for this. Before I got here, CHS, in partnership with DOC, knocked this out of the park. Now, anytime somebody gets sick in congregate care and dies, it's anytime too many. It should never happen. But it happened way the hell less in New York City than any other place in the country that I'm aware of. And I actually, before I had this job, tweeted something out about how inappropriate it was for people to be locked up in our jails for technical violations. And I called it COVID-ridden Rikers in my tweet. I remember it distinctly. And one of Patsy's staff members corrected me, and she was right. The infection rates are half what they are in the rest of the city. Please correct me if my math is wrong, because the math is correct. Math is correct. I've been drinking this through a fire hose this last week, and sometimes I get the numbers wrong, but that's pretty impressive. And I'm going to let them talk about whatever the heck is coming next. I think the fact that CHS is offering $25 incentives, I saw an article in the Times a week ago about incentives in correctional facilities, and the state they said had the highest uptake in inoculations was Pennsylvania. And I called the commissioner there, John Wetzel, who's a friend of mine, and he said that the incentives really did it. I think it was $25, and he said that really helped incentivize people who were incarcerated to get the inoculation. So I think they did fantastic, and I think they're about to do even more fantastic. And I wanted to say that before whoever goes next says whatever they're going to say.
Okay, so good morning. We have worked in partnership with CHS. We've had a plan in which cohorted new admissions and previously EMTC. And our plan has worked to keep the admissions together while CHS did testing and vaccination and such. And so we have received on a daily basis of any person who have tested positive. We currently only have 46 individuals at West Facility today. Our count at OBCC, which we opened for new admission processing, which on May 17th. And so we've closed EMTC for about the third time. And so OBCC is currently open where we are still doing our plan. We have a population of approximately 860 persons there. 5 of those housing areas are our general population, and we're continuing to close down on OBCC, the general population on a weekly basis, as well as flush out any of the new admissions who have been cleared. So there's only 5 general population housing areas there. We have 2 city sentence housing areas in which we're utilizing for workers, and we have 1 workers dorm that came from EMTC. And so we have been continuous with our plan. Nothing has changed. We're going out on a weekly basis soliciting the people in custody for the vaccines, and that has proven successful. And we're continuing to work with our partners, CHS, and great partners that they are, to come up with solutions. Because like the commissioner said, we knocked this out of the box, and we're proud of the work that we did. And although there are some things that we don't do good, there are a lot of things that we do great. And I'm proud to work hand in hand with each and every one of our members of staff to make sure that we're having the best possible and best practices for facilities.
So to keep the good news going, I am also very happy to let the board know and let the public know that we are finally in a place where we can reopen a number of our minimum services. This week, we are restarting barbershop services. We anticipate that haircuts should begin in all facilities by the end of the week. Next Monday, provided there is no unforeseen change in the COVID landscape between now and next Monday, we will be able to restart congregate religious services. Both barbershop services and congregate religious services will initially be provided in the same manner they were provided in last fall. For barbershop services, that's on-unit haircuts in the day room, with the exception of Rosie's, where we will be providing those services in the beauty shop. And for congregate religious services, that's an initial restart of congregations of no more than 10 people in custody. We have added additional services to our schedule to accommodate the need. And we've also added screens in our chapels so that we can finally pass the services and ensure that we are able to have enough chapels to cover the need of all of these additional services. Again, they're both critically important services for people in custody, and very excited to bring them back. The following week, on June 25th, we anticipate restarting in-person visitation services. In-person visitation services will be somewhat different than they were prior to COVID. We are strongly recommending that people make use of a pre-registration system that will go live on June 14th. That system is very similar to our existing televisit system, and we are encouraging people to register for their appointment. This will cut down on the number of people in the visit house and ensure that only people who need to come to the island for an appointment, for a visit, actually are the ones who are coming, and allow for appropriate social distancing. Part of the another reason that pre-registration system is important is because instead of doing an ongoing rolling basis of visits, visits will be provided in specific visit blocks. This is going to allow for appropriate sanitation to take place in between each visit time period. And finally, due to social distancing needs, the actual visit floor has been restructured to allow 6 feet of distance between each visit group. And that means that the actual visiting capacity of the visit floor has been decreased. So again, very important that people pre-register because there just may not be space for that walk-in. But we are so excited to be able to begin welcoming the public back into our facility. June 25th, as I said, the first day of our soft launch of in-person visits. Following that day, we're going to run in-person visits Monday through Friday, and Saturday and Sunday we will continue to host televisiting. We're going to reevaluate our soft launch schedule in 4 weeks' time and hope to be able to further expand our in-person visitation at that point. Very happy to answer any questions the board has.
I want to begin by echoing the sentiments of Commissioner Chevraldi concerning the efforts of the department and of correctional health services over the course of the last, now I guess 16 months. The board has said on occasion before that we applaud the efforts of the department and of CHS in connection with management of COVID-19 in the jails, but we can never say thank you enough. Sadly, certain people, did succumb to COVID, having been incarcerated. We don't know yet all of the circumstances surrounding that, and any loss of life is too much loss of life. That said, the department and CHS did a heroic job of minimizing the spread and the devastation in the jails, and you continue to do so. I think it's important to note that the efforts to ensure that all persons detained and officers are vaccinated, those who desire to be, that effort was initiated by the CHS working very closely with the department. It was not that the advocates had to push for it, nor did the board have to push for it. CHS and DOC undertook that on their own. And so we can't express our appreciation enough. The city has gone through a tumultuous time, and there were many on the board who rightfully so were concerned about spread, about social distancing, about masking and other preventive measures being taken, as well as the management of the spread when persons were identified to be infected. And the department and CHS heard the concerns and moved to try to be as responsive as you possibly could. There were some things that were out of your control, and you turned to the state, you turned to to City Hall, to the district attorneys, and we tried to partner with you on that. But I can't express my personal appreciation to the department and CHS enough for all that you have done to manage that. And I think that it is a model in terms of just crisis management that can be looked to, not just across the nation, but even for our new Commissioner Chevraldi and the department as you tackle other challenges. So thank you. I'm not sure if other board members have questions or comments at this moment. If there are none, then we will move to hear an update on the Nunes consent decree. And I'm asking the department for an update.
Good morning. My name is Heidi Grossman. I'm Deputy Commissioner of Legal Matters, and with me is Marshall Boak, Assistant Commissioner for the Nunes Compliance Unit. And together we're going to give our progress report and our update on the electronic monitoring report in Nunes. So we have come to you before. We talk about how achieving compliance is the department's top priority. It continues to be the department's top priority to come into compliance with the core principles of the Nunes consent judgment. We acknowledge very hard work that's ahead of us to address the non-compliance, and that has to do with the use of force, the timely staff discipline, and the safety and supervision of young adults in our care. Before we go into some of the ways that the department will achieve or plan to commit to compliance. I think it's important to acknowledge a very critical milestone that the department has achieved in moving our investigation into an area of compliance from non-compliance. This will give the department and will provide the foundation for addressing excessive and unnecessary use of force. There were, as we know, we've discussed 328 original separate provisions in the Nunes consent judgment. 97 are no longer active. That represents about 30%. And while I mentioned that we have much to do to achieve compliance, there are things that the department, when we put our heads together and we really focus on a methodical way, on a systemic way of rolling out reform, that we can achieve when we focus on those efforts. Of the 231 remaining, 91% are in substantial or partial compliance. That's not to say that we don't, as I said, have much more to do, but these represent foundational requirements that need to be in place before the department can really focus on the core remaining features of the consent judgment that's left. And these are the most important. Staff discipline. It took us 2 years, as you know, to build and implement the department's intake squad. And we know that the monitor in the past has recognized that the consent judgment did hinder the department's timely investigations. That intake squad became effective in February 2020. And as a result of rolling out the intake squad, use of force investigations are completed within 25 business days. And that enables the department to determine if force was appropriate and if discipline was required. It also allows the department to determine if there's other corrective action that needs to be taken and whether there are further investigations that are needed. The previous investigation structure resulted in a backlog of about 10,000 investigations, and today all but a handful have been closed. But of course, when one clears one backlog and we have to move it into our trials unit, that then of course leads to a significant increase in trials cases and now has resulted in an increased backlog in our discipline with the trials. The monitor has acknowledged that the department has improved in many other disciplinary corrective measures. For example, we have improved upon our ability and our implementation of command disciplines. We have done more retraining, and we have utilized suspensions as a means of addressing misconduct very close in time to when an incident occurs. The formal disciplinary process involves external parties outside of the department's control. That would be the oath process. And as you know, each individual staff member who is represented in a disciplinary procedure has their own due process rights, and they can exercise that right and choose to either negotiate a plea or they can choose to go to trial. The plan to address the backlog with our trials unit is one is that we need to fill some of the vacancies that we have in the trials unit. There are about 12 vacancies, and there was a delay in filling those vacancies due to hiring restrictions, but those obstacles have been removed and the department's actively recruiting. The department is also exploring another creative solution, which is to try to enlist the help of pro bono attorneys. We've worked with the Union Council to come up with an agreement and to come up with a temporary solution so that we can get assistance in that way as well. In addition, the department and the city is in discussions with Oath. That will be led by the law department, and we're exploring other options to try to increase the number of conferences and proceedings that can be held before Oath so that we can move these cases along expeditiously. Now we'll turn we'll discuss the Rndc safety and supervision of young adults, and I'll turn that over to Assistant Commissioner Marshall Vogt.
Thank you, Deputy Commissioner Grossman, and good morning, members of the board. Just want to start by saying that the department completely recognizes the importance of its obligations with respect to the young population under the consent decree. The monitor's report makes it very clear that we still have plenty of work ahead of us to better manage this population. And the safe management of this population is aligned, I believe, with the goals and vision of this administration, all the members of the board, and members of the public. With that being said, the monitoring team has noticed some improvement at Rndc, which, as you're aware, is the facility that houses the majority of youth in our custody. And to quote the monitoring team with respect to force, and I quote, for 18-year-olds, the use of force rate has decreased 33% from 60.5 in 2018 to 40.3 in the current monitoring period. The use of force rate also declined among young adults aged 19 to 21 by 43%. The monitoring team is very encouraged by this trend, end quote. They further stated that Rndc's rates of use of force in fights have significantly improved over the past 2 years. And this is not to suggest that we're satisfied with where we are or diminish the concerns of the board, but these facts should be recognized. As we have previously reported, the department developed the Rndc plan to address safety concerns relating to this population. The plan includes elements to improve how we manage this population, all of which are consistent with correctional best practices, which includes steady staffing, the development of new policies and procedures to better manage individuals housed at Rndc, the creation of new programming initiatives, including the use of case management, the implementation of gaming devices to reduce idle time and promote educational activities, positive reinforcement through items that can be earned, and the implementation of the unit management model to provide more oversight and supervision for our young adult housing areas, including designating a ADW as a unit manager over those units. COVID-19 unfortunately slowed the rollout of this initiative, and it also had the unfortunate consequences affecting some of the core operations, such as limiting programming options, limiting third-party providers, changes to our procedures for barbershop, which, as we stated, will be brought back online in the immediate future, and changing how we deliver educational services. And unfortunately, this resulted in an increase in idle time for this population, which we recognize we have to address. In September 2020, we began our official rollout of this Rndc plan despite some of these challenges. We started this rollout in Building 6 at Rndc with the idea of slowly rolling this out building by building in the facility to ensure that we have fidelity to the model that we created. And as expected, as with any new initiative, it's taken time for staff to become acclimated to the expectations and procedures. And on top of that, we've also experienced staffing challenges coming into this year that have affected the rollout in Building 6 and then even expanding that rollout elsewhere. As I said, steady staffing is a key element to our vision of how to better manage this population. It ensures that people in custody and our staff develop a rapport, that we have more consistency in our day-to-day operations with how things function in housing areas, and to make sure that our staff members have that unique knowledge of a housing unit and the persons in custody to better manage inevitable issues that arise in a correctional setting. If staff are unavailable to work, these posts need to be filled by other staff members. But unfortunately, it's not always possible to backfill these areas with other steady staff members. Furthermore, if staff become unavailable to work with the population directly, we again have to change or amend those steady staffing rosters. But I just want to say, despite these challenges with staffing, which we're working very hard to address, we still have developed needs assessments and individualized program plans for this population. And as we previously reported, we now expect limiting program groups to return as our operations normalize. The department has established a process that, while admittedly in need of improvement, gives staff the opportunity to address misbehavior in real time to better manage this young population. Unit management training has been rolled out to 82% of available staff at Rndc, despite training limitations due to COVID-19. While the implementation itself still needs work, we believe strongly that the plan and strategy itself are sound, and there have been some successes. We remain committed to our current plan, as again, we believe that it is consistent with best correctional practices, and if we successfully implement it, it should lead to better management of our housing areas. And we look forward to continuing to work with the monitoring team to continue to address the challenges in this rollout, and also to further enhance this model that we've created. Overall, we have to acknowledge there's significant work to be done, and we want to make it clear that we're committed to the reforms outlined in the Nunes consent decree. And we appreciate and understand the importance of what needs to be done to address the concerns of the monitor, members of the board, and the public to achieve complete compliance with the consent judgment. However, again, we also have to recognize that there have been successes under the consent decree. And again, this is to quote the monitoring team directly from the 11th report. The department has achieved some significant milestones since November 1, 2015. The 16 and 17-year-old youth have been removed from Rikers Island. The department has developed and deployed training to staff on the relevant reforms. The department has developed viable alternatives to the use of punitive segregation for young adults that, while in need of improvement, successfully eradicated the harmful practice of long-term isolation for 18 to 21-year-olds. The ability to assess use of force incidents has also improved significantly. There's video footage for almost all incidents that occur in the agency. Staff reports are now timely and routinely submitted for review. Facility leadership now conduct an initial assessment of all use of force incidents, and while the quality of the reviews still need improvement, they have come a long way from where they started. The investigation of use of force incidents has been overhauled, and the advent of intake investigations means all use of force incidents now receive a timely review by ID, and the backlog of older investigations is nearly complete. The department has also made strides in holding staff accountable, and transparency of the disciplinary process has improved, end quote. And we just received a further update and a new report from the monitoring team that as of May 31st, the backlog of ID investigations has been closed as required under the remedial order. These are undoubtedly major accomplishments that need to be recognized. And again, this does not diminish what we have ahead of us, but there has been progress since 2015. We strongly believe that. And we look forward to continuing to work with the monitoring team towards substantial compliance with all remaining aspects of the consent judgment. We also recognize that broader culture change, even outside of the Nunes consent decree, will actually support the requirements of the consent decree. And with that in mind, I'd like to turn it over to Chief Jennings to discuss more about DOC's culture change efforts.
Thank you very much, Heidi and Martin, for covering the recent work and highlighting the detailed areas where there is progress and other areas where there's still important work to be done with respect to Nunes. I just want to reiterate that all of the provisions and target metrics discussed are very important, and this department and my office takes each and every one of them incredibly serious. It's easy to underestimate the work that is done every day behind the scenes in this area. At the same time, I think it's important to clarify, especially for the board, that compliance with the provisions of Nunes is not to be all in all handbook for culture change and DOC reform. We began culture change by changing the way in which we called people in custody. And also we changed our vision, mission, and value statements to make sure that it was inclusive of everyone. Nunes might create a safe floor, but it's not the ceiling that we're aiming to reach. There is significant more work, and this department needs to do in order to improve our culture. Some related and much not related to Nunes. When most people in the public think of jails, they think of bar stock, lock, and keys. But those of us who live it on both sides of the gate know that corrections is about people. A key without a hand to turn is just a piece of metal. While we work to gain compliance with each Nunes provision, we must remember the broader picture of culture change efforts and the prevailing need through all of this work to bring our staff up with us. When our work centers around a human service approach, our staff see themselves as change agents empowered to help others. That is when we know we have succeeded. I think it's more important, especially in this discussion, to remember that reform works broadly. It is not just about compliance or partial compliance. If we are doing it correctly, it needs to be about excellence. I just want you all to know that we understand this broader need, and we will continue to incorporate this vision as we work through the remaining Nunes provisions. Thank you.
Thank you all. Are there board members that want to comment? I will just say that I appreciate the work that has been done to date, and I appreciate all the more the recognition that much more needs to be done for us, both board and department, to realize the aims of the Nunes consent decree. It does not appear that there are any board members who would like to comment, and so we are going to move to the final agenda item on the board for this board member meeting, and that is public comment. There is one board member that, I'm sorry, not board member, but one person who did not get to speak during the first round of public comment, whose name was on the list but did not speak, and that is Kelly Grace Price. And so that I ask that we begin with her. I will note for those who are concerned, in addition to being a board member and chair and having a full-time job and other responsibilities, am a mother. And today, even though I have had to travel with my son for personal reasons, I came to this board meeting because it was an important board meeting. But I now have to leave because I have to tend to my personal family responsibilities. Not that everybody needs to know that, but there are people who are concerned about my whereabouts. So I am turning this meeting now over to Vice Chair Stanley Richards, and I will get an account of what happened during public comment. I wish everybody well. Have a good day, and we'll see you, I guess, in September. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. So we're going to turn to public comment, as Jennifer said. I have a list of speakers who signed up to speak. I'm going to call every person's name. When you hear your name, please raise your hand using the hand icon below the participants list on your WebEx screen. If you don't see the participants list, click on the silhouette of a person on the menu at the bottom of your screen. Once you open the participants list, you should see the hand icon in order to raise your hand. When you raise your hand, we will unmute you and you will begin to be able to turn your video, and you can then begin your public comment. I will tell you when it has been 3 minutes, and we will move to the next speaker. The board welcomes written comment. You can email written comment to boc@boc.nyc.gov or mail it to 2 Lafayette, 12th floor, room 1221, New York, New York, 10007. I will now call on our first speaker, Grace. Is Grace on?
I don't believe Grace has joined us.
Okay. Our next speaker is Haley Cockery.
Hello. My name is Haley Corkery, and I am a legal intern with the Urban Justice Center. And today I will be reading testimony about prison conditions and restrictive housing on behalf of an individual incarcerated on Rikers. I'm 38 years old, and I've been incarcerated on Rikers Island since December 2020. I was recently moved from Anna M. Cross Center to George R. Vierno Center after being violently beaten by other inmates. Before my transfer to GRVC, I was briefly hospitalized, but I was discharged prematurely over my strenuous objections. Officers regularly use excessive force. Recently, while I was still at AMKC, an officer sprayed mace in my eyes while I was quietly waiting in line to receive my methadone medication. I wasn't given any medical attention. I was ultimately taken to the showers, but the water in the showers was not turned on, so I couldn't even get some slight relief by rinsing out my eyes. The staff finally turned it on after prolonged begging. The water was not enough to stop the burning in my eyes, but the officers refused to provide milk or any other treatment when I asked. I take medication for various mental health disorders. When I've tried to access social services or counselors for any sort of support, it has been extremely hard to get in touch with them. They are incredibly overextended and overworked. On the rare occasions when I am able to meet with mental health staff, the encounters have been unhelpful and felt rote and scripted. I've also had physical conditions that need treatment. I have gout in my knees that need to be drained, but I'm still on the waiting list to have this addressed. I also have symptoms of diabetes, but the facility will not let me get tested. The food I am able to eat and afford with my commissary is too sugary, and I fear this is worsening my condition. Some of my worst experiences have been in restrictive housing. At the end of December 2020, I was placed in restricted housing and was not told why. I was granted no hearing or explanation before or after I was placed in restricted housing. For 9 days, I was forced to stay in a small cell with no functioning sink or toilet. The sink let out a tiny dribble of water. I had to wait roughly an hour to fill a cup. During this time, the COs did not give me any food or medication. They refused to provide me with my basic needs and claimed I was refusing food and medicine, which was not true. They told the medication providers that there was no one in the building that takes methadone while writing down that I'd refused medication, and neither of those statements are true. I take methadone and did not refuse it. I was never offered it. I was also given no detox maintenance after being deprived of methadone. I had to beg people passing by for help, and sometimes another inmate was kind enough to leave me some water or a piece of bread. In addition to lying and denying me my basic needs, the COs would goad and antagonize me while they walked by my cell. I was let out on day 5 to take a shower, and as soon as I was done, I was forced to return to the cell and its unlivable conditions for another 4 days. The awful conditions had a profound impact on my physical and mental health. I could feel myself losing my grip on sanity. I had no food, water, space, or human interaction. Without a functioning toilet, I was literally forced to throw my own waste out of my cell to stop the toilet from overflowing. Despite my best efforts.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I would encourage you to submit that testimony to the board. And thank you.
Thank you.
Need to go to our next speaker, Benny Basio.
I believe he's joined the call.
He's not on?
Nope.
Our next speaker is Matthew Romano.
Matthew's no longer on the call either.
Ashaki Antone.
Antoine's not on the call any longer.
Lee Steins Gale. I just seen Lee. Leah. Bennett?
It looks like I tried to make them a participant. It looks like they left the call.
Okay. Kayla Simpson?
Good morning, everybody. I'm Kayla Simpson. I'm a staff attorney at the Legal Aid Society's Prisoners' Rights Project and counsel to the plaintiff class in Nunes, and I want to talk about Nunes this morning. To be clear, the 11th Nunes Monitor's report is the most striking condemnation of performance and fundamental noncompliance yet. We implore the board to please read it because, of course, there are no easy answers for the issues in the jails, and overseeing them requires a deep understanding of the barriers to reform, and the report helps us get that. And I want to focus this morning on the Emergency Services Unit as an illustration. This unit's supposed to be elite, and what it actually is a militarized rogue squad not accountable to any facility. And I'll quote the monitor. ESU teams are far too frequently hyper-confrontational and unprofessional. They almost always fail to first attempt to de-escalate when they arrived on a scene and appear to presume force will be required no matter the circumstance. They often utilize improper head strikes, violent body slams and takedowns, violent wall slams, painful and unsafe escort holds, unnecessary use of OC spray, and prohibited holds. The default response is often exceedingly disproportionate to the level of threat, including the use of high-impact strikes, OC grenades, and/or batons. Supervisors? The monitor says either they are not present or they are of no use when they fail to address problematic tactics. And the tactics themselves, far too many ESU staff come to the scenes with no apparent tactical plan, leading to, quote, chaos and serious security breaches. And what's worse, the monitor describes how staff and supervisors in the housing units default to these emergency response teams to solve routine day-to-day problems, frustration about lack of commissary, routine searches, passive resistance to lock-ins, problems, to paraphrase the monitor, that should not require a riot squad to solve them. And these are some of the reasons we've called for the disbandment of ESU, but why do I raise this with the board this morning? First, because this agency is not complying with a multitude of minimum standards and giving you the excuse that it's understaffed, when the monitor plainly rebuts that contention and identifies ESU as a prime example of mismanagement. And second, because entrenched in this abusive, unchecked unit are the problems that desperately need your eyes. Deeply deficient mid-level supervisors, dangerous staffing inefficiencies, not shortages, and a default to force and shock tactics to solve problems. How many people, for example, will find themselves in RMAS level 1 because of a poorly executed, abusive ESU search that could have been solved by line staff and the ability to actually de-escalate? The board must make it its business to know the answer. And I just want to say a few words on heat in the seconds I have left. The department's plan fails to address longstanding problems like a lack of proactive approach to protecting heat-sensitive individuals who've reportedly refused, a lack of escorts making cool showers or ice delivery or trips to the clinic for reevaluation dubious, deficient policies, and a tradition of practice falling short of policy requires close watch from the board. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kayla. Understand Grace is with us on the phone.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, can you hear me,
Grace.
Stanley?
Yes.
Hi,
we
good
can hear you.
morning. Hi.
Good morning.
Great, how exciting. I'm so excited to finally be on this call. I want to thank the board for allowing me to speak today. I'm Kelly Grace Price from Close Rosie's. I'll turn in my written comment. First, I want to welcome new Commissioner Chevraldi. It's been hard to log on to this hearing and to listen, but what I'm hearing from you, Commissioner Chevraldi, sounds like seeds of promise. I'll leave it at that. I want to quickly talk about what is going on with the certification of this addended rule. The New York City Charter very specifically mandates that every new rule has to be published with a certification from the law department. This new rule that was published again in the late night of a Friday evening before a major board vote was not accompanied by a certification. I want to remind you that section 1043D of the New York City Charter reads, the law department and the mayor's office of operations shall review each proposed rule and prior to publication of such proposed rule in the city record. At the conclusion of its review, the law department shall state whether each proposed rule is drafted to accomplish the purpose, is not in conflict with other rules, and is narrowed down to achieve its stated purpose. After completing the review as set forth in the paragraph of the subdivision, the law department and the mayor's office of operations shall certify that they have performed such a review and shall promptly transmit a copy of such certification, including the analysis performed by the mayor's office of operations to the relevant agency. Such agencies shall annex such
Grace, we lost you. We lost you. Apologies. If we're able to get you back, you have about a minute and 30 seconds left. We're going to go on to our next speaker until we can get reconnected. Our next speaker is Julia Solomons.
Hello, can you all hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you. My name is Julia Solomons. I'm a social worker at the Bronx Defenders and a member of the Jails Action Coalition. We thank the board for hearing advocate concerns about the restrictive housing rule throughout the public comment period. Although there are some changes to the rule that we were encouraged to see, the general direction and spirit of the rule engender deep concern, especially the planned implementation with respect to out-of-cell time. We are all aware that DOC is expanding the structurally restrictive housing units at NIC, which will become level 1 of RMAS. We have sounded the alarm repeatedly about these units, how isolating they are, how dangerous for our clients' mental health, and how they are absolutely not a move away from solitary confinement. The pictures are horrifying, as are the reports from our clients being held there. True out-of-cell time means congregate living and congregate programming. True recreation time means out of doors in a space where a person can run or get physical exercise with other people. We echo what so many others have said. New York State's passage of halt solitary sets a tone for the state that this plan falls far short of, and to claim that these units will not be bound by halt protections is simply a denial of reality. We do commend the board for revising the rule to include access to counsel and disciplinary proceedings. Given the space for continued torture that this rule allows the department, it is critical that advocates be present to participate in real time and to ensure that people are not railroaded into any restrictive unit or status. We cautiously await the board's commitment and Commissioner Chevraldi's commitment to implementation of access to counsel and fair hearings and look forward to being part of that conversation. The implementation must include feedback from people in custody, advocates, and defenders in order to be successful. We also await the board's oversight of that process and your pressure on the department to adhere to the implementation timeline and to make this process meaningful. Lastly, we want to comment quickly on the heat. It is truly disappointing that we wait to discuss heat responses every single year until after we've seen consistent high temperatures in the city, until people are already suffering. People like our client at RMSC, who reports no fans in her unit with 9 of 12 vents broken, as well as overcrowdedness, 29 people in the dorm, and not enough access to water. Or our client at Rndc has been struggling to sleep and simply to get through the day. We ask that the board hold the department accountable to compliance with the heat amelioration measures they spoke about today, not just their plans, as we all know well that their commitment does not mean compliance. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie. Our next speaker is Ms. V.
Hello?
We can hear you, Ms. V.
Okay, well, let me correctly introduce myself as Minister Dr. Victoria A. Phillips, Ms. V. And so I'm a member of the Jails Action Coalition, Justice for Women Task Force, Zero Profits, Fair Chance for Housing, and many others. I didn't want to say all of that earlier because I had a personal point in opinion I wanted to get on the record. But now I want to address a few things. So today, Dr. Cohen mentioned not wanting to put his fellow board members on the spot. Yet, honestly, you all should be on the spot. The Federal Monitor has released 11 reports that I'm sure none of you have read in its entirety because of the way you vote. Also, there's many people on this board who have expertise with young adults, yet none of you spoke up and you all agreed that for this rule that will put young adults possibly in level 1 indefinitely. Around the heat, Chief Jennings mentioned once someone has been quarantined and the quarantine period is over, they are returned to AC housing. So with 2 medical doctors on this board, not one of you asked about their illness being treated while doing quarantine, or the fact that water is a real issue during these heat waves. And a housing unit with 40 or 50 people can get 1 barrel of water that can be done in 10 minutes and not receive another barrel of water to the next tour. Address those issues. When we talked about the women, thank you for addressing the women. However, not one of you raised the question. It was answered that there's 250 women, no babies in the fraternity. Not one of you asked how many women are there pregnant right now. Vera actually stated 86% of DOC's budget last year went to personnel reasons. This board needs to question DOC why programming isn't effective, why escorts aren't happening, why valid PPE isn't being given, because there's so many things wrong with this. There's so much to say. They said they're going to start religious services next Monday, but they told this board they already restarted religious services. Question them on that. And they also told y'all they was doing it 10 people at a time. So now they're starting next Monday, 10 people at a time with additional TV services. Make the law make sense. And lastly, I really want to say COVID should not be praised because we all know people haven't gotten proper PPE. People are only given PPE if they're leaving their units. People don't have proper cleaning supplies. Chief Jennings herself told you on the record, each unit is given 40 PPE. Yet you all know many units had 48, 50 people. Are those extra 8 to 10 people not given PPE? If PPE is defective, does there not have anything to replace that? Make it make sense. And you medical doctors, stand up and do your job. You took an oath to do no harm. Do no harm for the people of New York. Y'all stay blessed.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Victor Pate. Victor, you with us?
It looks like Victor's having trouble with the audio connection. I'll put Victor offline.
Okay. Our next speaker is Annie Goodman.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Annie. I'm a legal intern with UJC, and I'm going to share testimony from someone in restricted housing in Rikers, which I think illustrates why the new rule on restricted housing does not go far enough. Growing up, my nickname was cool because I could hang with any group of kids. My mom was a teacher for students with disabilities, and that taught me a different side of caring. My community was vibrant, and there was a lot of love. It was a place where neighbors helped you out and had your back. Now, at age 52, I'm looking back on my life and thinking, how did I get here? It's been almost 2 years since I was arrested. For most of that time, I have been in some form of restricted housing. In 2019, I was placed in my own unit as part of a court-ordered lockdown, not as a disciplinary measure. Inside the cell, there was a TV, stool, desk, sink. Then, 4 months ago, and this is from February, so it's been much longer than that now, I was moved to GRVC. They put us into the old punitive segregation unit for disciplinaries. It's like being in the dungeon of a medieval castle. Everything is broken. At one point, feces from one cell leaked down into the cell below. It is freezing because the heat is not turned on. Again, this was in February. The cell is basically a box with nothing in it. The only window I have in my cell is a small slot. 30 feet away, there's a TV on the wall. I have to stand to watch TV through the slot, which is difficult because I have a back injury. Other than the TV, there's no stimulation. I feel like being in solitary is making me lose my ability to articulate myself. None of the minimum standards are followed. We don't get adequate social services or medical care. People have to hurt themselves or act out to get basic treatment. If you ask for a sick call, they send someone to your cell who asks you what's wrong through the slot. They give you medication based on a verbal conversation, not an actual medical exam. And it violates confidentiality and privacy. You're speaking to the doctor through the sliding door of your cell, and everyone around you can hear. I'm supposed to be taken to a facility for physical therapy once every 2 weeks for my back problems, but they stopped doing that. And forget about basic hygiene. No barber, no nail clippers. We're supposed to have access to those things, but we don't. My toenails are so long that wearing shoes is painful. I'm supposed to get 1 hour of recreational time each day, but I don't always. And even when I do, it's often not much of a break from confinement. Leaving my cold cell to stand outside in the snow is hardly an upgrade. Solitary also limits your ability to fight back. They won't let me access the law library. How can I marshal cases to build my defense? At this point, I'm just thinking I'll do the time to get out of here, which is wrong. I have family out there, kids, a wife who is mentally unstable, grandkids, and they need my assistance. But I just have to stick it out because we don't have services. We are essentially ignored here. They put you in the box and leave you. They just moved 60 people from the punitive section of another facility to the Bing at GRVC. These people are violent and high on drugs. The guards aren't able to control them. It feels like we're under siege. There's an emergency alert nearly every day. I'm 52 years old, and at this point, I just feel defeated. By the time a hearing happens, if it ever happens, almost 2 years will have passed. I see the governor and other politicians saying they're going to act, but it's not true.
Thank you. Please, as I encourage people, please submit that testimony. It will be part of the record. Thank you. Our next speaker is Giovanna Velez.
I don't believe that person is here.
Okay. Z Silverstein.
They're going to pass.
Okay. Edith De La Rosa.
I don't believe that person's here.
Okay. 5.
I don't believe 5's here.
Did we get Grace back?
Yeah, give me 1 second. Great.
Hi, I'll
Grace,
be
you're
quick.
unmuted.
Hi, thank you. I'm sorry. I don't know what happened. I was talking specifically about the certification of the rule. I'm not quite sure how far along I had read, but I'll read just the end part I wanted to remind the board of. After completing the review as set forth in paragraph 1 of the subdivision, the law department and the mayor's office of operations shall certify that they have performed such a review and shall promptly transmit a copy of such certification, including the analysis performed by the mayor's office of operations, to the relevant agency. Such agency shall annex such certification and analysis to the full text of the proposed rule as published in the city record. Such certification analysis shall also be made available to the public on the city's website and transmitted to the speaker of the city council at the time of publication. In no event shall a proposed rule be submitted for initial publication in the city record unless the law department and the mayor's office of operations have issued such certification and analysis. There's no certification. Sorry, that was horrible English. There's not a certification attached to this revised rule that was posted late on Friday night. The city charter says that inadvertent failure to comply with the subdivision shall not result in the invalidation of any rule, but that's challengeable. The last time that you published a rule was the PREA rule, and you did the same thing. You published the rule the Friday night before a Tuesday vote on the meeting, and you published it with a certification that did not have a date on it because someone did not want us to know how long the board had sat on the rule after the city law department had certified it. So there's a pattern, a concerted pattern of people monkeying with this specific city charter provision that would only tank your rule. You know me, I like to use the courts to fight my battles. It's not the end of this. It's very clear that the rule that you voted on today was not published with certification because you didn't want us to know how long you had it and you sat on it. And I'm very unhappy about this. I'm tired of this monkey business. We all can read the city charter. And at the very basic, the members of the Board of Correction need to read the city charter and understand the rules that they need to abide by in the rulemaking process. Thank you. I know I've gone over, but this is not the end of it. And the rule that you have just voted on is not as solid as you think it is. Thank you so much for hearing me out.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Joanne Cortia.
That person's not here.
Okay. Let's go with Claudia Forrester.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Perfect. Good morning. My name is Claudia Forrester, and I am a jail services advocate at Brooklyn Defender Services. Today, I want to share the stories of people in custody who repeatedly call our office for help because the department's continued mismanagement of staff leads to people failing to receive their most basic services. Lack of access to recreation has become a norm for most people I speak to. One individual shared that he hadn't seen the sun or been outside in fresh air for 2 whole months. The response from DOC staff is always the same. We're understaffed, there's nothing we can do. Data shows how spending time outdoors is essential for physical and mental health. Yet at the moment, incarcerated people are not even getting an hour of recreation a day, a requirement of the board's own minimum standards. The impact of DOC's mismanagement of its staff is incredibly dangerous, as it impacts even the most essential of services. I have spoken with 3 people recently who report not receiving their anti-seizure medication consistently due to a lack of DOC escorts. One client shared that the lack of access to his medication has resulted in his having at least 1 seizure a week. A CHS nurse told him, "I don't understand how you're still alive, let alone still walking." Frequently, the only time he gets his medication is when he refuses to go back into his unit until the security team comes. Incarcerated New Yorkers should not have to beg or cause problems in order to get their very essential medication. DOC has shown time and time again that they are not capable of upholding even the most basic of minimum standards. DOC's mismanagement of staff is also severely impacting incarcerated people's connections to their loved ones. In the last week, I've met with 10 people across different facilities, and each person I spoke to shared that their mail has been arriving weeks or months late, if at all. One person had their family video conference canceled for the 2nd time in a row due to understaffing issues. Their family has been trying to meet with them for 2 months, but each time the video conference is canceled due to a DOC error. Individuals are craving letters, photos, video chats, anything from their loved ones to help them get through their days, but even that has been cut off. The mismanagement of DOC staff is leading incarcerated New Yorkers to be even more isolated than ever before. Across the board, we are seeing very basic services break down. Individuals described meals arriving hours late, if at all, commissary stock low or severely limited, no clothing provided by DOC because there is no one to bring it. Every single basic service that DOC is meant to provide to those inside is being impacted, and ignoring these issues has become the norm. I spoke to one person this week who has been in and out of Rikers for most of his life. During our visit, he arrived demoralized and shared, "This is the worst I have ever seen it. Nothing works, there is nothing to do, no one cares. I have never seen it this bad."
Thank you,
Again and
Claudia.
again, incarcerated New Yorkers are being told to be patient and go without their basic services, without seeing the sun, without their
Thank you,
essential
Claudia.
medications. Thank you.
I encourage you to, again, submit your testimony. We're
Yeah.
going to go to our next speaker. Thank you. Lauren Persabali.
That person's not with us.
Okay. Erica Varela.
That person is also not with us.
Okay. Stephen Bell.
That person's not with us.
And our last speaker is Julia Curbs.
Yes, hi there. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Julia.
Thank you so much. My name is Julia Curbs, and I'm here today on behalf of New York County Defender Services and wanted to speak briefly about family visitation. As you can imagine, we've had calls from clients and their families constantly for the past 14 months, just desperate to do in-person visits. And the level of isolation that our incarcerated clients have dealt with has been absolutely heartbreaking. And while we're encouraged to hear that in-person visitation will be starting up again soon, we are concerned about plans for limited capacity. If these limits on capacity are pretty stringent, people may still not be able to see their families for many months. And based on the information we've received today, we understand that there will be pre-registration, and this online sign-up could also pose obstacles for people with limited computer and phone access or those with low levels of internet literacy. This is something that we've seen with televisits for families, And a lot of our clients' families have struggled to organize those throughout the pandemic. And we're concerned that this online visit sign-up system could create similar problems. So we really hope that walk-in visitors will soon be allowed as normal. We understand that there are limitations due to social distancing measures, but people are just so desperate to see their families after so long. And we do hope that this pre-registration system will be monitored carefully to ensure equity of access for incarcerated people and their families, and that as soon as possible, visitation will be expanded such that it can ultimately approach pre-COVID levels. Thank you.
Thank you, Julia. That concludes the public comment, and it concludes our June 8th board meeting. As we end, I just want to extend thanks to all of the public and the public comments we received. It is part of our record, and we appreciate the time you've taken out of your day to give us feedback, so that at the end of the day, we have a better way of managing our oversight. I want to thank the board members for your commitment to this process and your commitment to seeing this through. And finally, I want to thank all of the board staff, Meg and our entire board staff, for your tireless work behind the scenes and on the ground to prepare for each of these meetings, to prepare for our rules. It is something we should all be proud of. And I just want to thank you for the work you do every single day to allow us as board members to fulfill our oversight role. Our next board meeting is scheduled for July 13th, 2021 at 9 a.m. This meeting will be held via WebEx. Details will be available on our website, and we will send an email to interested parties. Again, I want to thank everybody. Have a great day. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thanks, Stanley.